I'm your host, Jason Cavness. Guest today is Sarah Bell. Sarah, you ready to be great today?
Say again?
Sarah, you ready to be great today?
Yes, I am ready to be great today.
Sarah, what do you do for fun?
Okay. My favorite things to do for fun, I like to hike and I like to travel. Traveling is probably my biggest passion. Been restricted a bit since I had kids, but just getting back on it post-COVID as well.
So you're saying it's not a good idea, like travel on your own and leave the kids by the house by themselves?
Well, do you know what? This weekend I am actually going to Alaska to try and see the Northern Lights.
Oh, wow.
40 years I have lived and I have not seen them once. So I'm going away child-free to try and do that.
Nice. So what's some of your favorite places you've been to traveling so far?
Good question. So I was lucky enough to go to the Galapagos Islands about 20 years ago, before it got really expensive to go. And that was just unreal. It was like being on another planet, like insane wildlife, like, kind of a bit like Hawaii in terms of what it looks like. But just the wildlife they had was just insane. Like iguanas everywhere. Like you couldn't always walk because there were iguanas on the path. Insane.
Isn't it crazy how there's all these nice places to go to, but then tourism kind of ruins it in a way,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I think having said that, I have noticed more and more that you tend to have places that are more off the beaten track that are coming up. And so places like Rome, Paris, New York, I think over time people will stop going there quite so much because they're just oversaturated. Like I saw a really interesting picture of like Santorini in Greece. And it was like what you see on Instagram and then what reality is like. And of course, Instagram looks amazing. No one there. Reality, you've got people up against each other walking down the street.
Yeah. When I was in the army, me and my family were in Vicenza, Italy for like 2.5 years. It's like 30 minutes like west of Venice. And Venice is like, tourist, like a tourist place, right? But it's like it's the tourist picture and then it's like the reality, right? Like summertime is like doo-doo brown shit water, people like hot and bothered. People charging you like $20 for ice cream cone.
Oh my God. Yeah, I have not been to Venice in a really long time, but I can't even imagine going there now, especially not in the summer.
Yeah. So what's been your favorite place to travel so far?
So since we moved to America about 8 years ago, one of my favorites is Hawaii. Like it's no one really goes there from England because it's kind of a long way. But I love the snorkeling there. I love the volcanic landscape. Like everything about Hawaii is great.
So you're a big snorkeler?
I am. Yeah, I love snorkeling. And I managed to find a snorkel that is prescription, so I can see underwater as well.
I'm guessing you don't do much snorkeling off the coast of Washington, do you?
I have tried. It's freezing cold, and I mean you can see a few fish, but they're all grey.
Yeah.
The thing about Hawaii is everything is in color. How are you? Where do you like to go?
Italy's the favorite place that's where I'm from. But actually, I just came from Vietnam about a week ago. Yeah, I was there with a friend of mine and his wife, September 1st, September 10th. That's really nice. Yeah.
Where else did you go?
Ho Chi Minh City. That's where we stayed at. We went to a place called Vang Tao Beach for one day.
Okay.
Really nice. Yeah, the water is warm and stuff. It was crazy. It's like right by the port, like one of the ports of Vietnam. You see all these cargo ships in the bay, right? It's insane how many cargo ships it was. Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. I bet it was crazy with motorbikes. I've only been to Hanoi, but the motorbikes just crowding the streets was crazy.
Yeah, I call it the walk of death.
Yeah.
Like for people who have never been to Vietnam, bases like you have a 4-lane intersection, like all these cars, all these scooters, and all these people, everyone just goes at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're just like, dodging cars and stuff,
You literally take your life in your hands anytime you cross.
It's a leap of faith.
Yeah.
But it works because everyone like kind of walks slow, all the cars go slow. Now, I messed up a couple of times. I almost do the walk of death here, right? But I look like I caught myself.
Do you know what? I'm always worried I'm going to get in trouble over here because in England, you can just cross the street and, at any point and people will stop for you.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm pretty sure it's an offense in the US and cars do not stop. Yeah.
You're walking, unfortunately. Yeah, it's crazy. So what's a place you've been to where like you really enjoyed it or people were like, you had fun there?
Oh, okay. Tri-Cities, Washington.
Seriously? Okay.
Yeah. Before I went, a lot of people said like, why would you go there? And like, why wouldn't I go there? And I mean, it was pretty chill. We just did a lot of kind of like going for walks, eating. It was great. I loved it there. But a lot of people wondered why.
Okay. Yeah, I was not expecting that. I think you say something, I don't know, like, some random country in South America or something like that.
No, I mean, I think my probably one regret of a country I went to was I went into the city is Quito, and I'm gonna get the country. But either way, we got there, and I'd kind of been like hyper aware of keeping my stuff about me, and then I took off like a bag and I put it under my legs. And then my husband and I were in the car, and then the next thing I knew, somebody had put something against the window smashed, and they grabbed the bag which had both our passports in, like all sorts of stuff. And we spent the next 2 days trying to get passports. No, it was in Peru, in Lima. And it was just insane. And yeah, that was a pretty horrendous experience. My husband bolted out the car, ran after the person, and I just had visions of him, I don't know, something happening to him
or something,
or kidnapped, yeah, shot. Yeah. So that's probably the scariest experience I think I've had whilst traveling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any place you want to go next?
I really want to go to Japan.
Japan, okay.
Yeah, that's high on my priority list, but I think it's got really expensive and busy, and so I think I'm almost priced out of Japan. I was lucky enough, kind of 20 years to travel a lot when the pound was great. Like at one point, it was $2 to the pound.
Yeah.
And so I was able to travel a lot when I was younger. So yeah, we'll see how that goes going forward.
And so you going to Alaska this weekend for the Northern Lights?
Yes.
How long are you going to be up there?
Just 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah. But I think it's going to be cloudy the whole time. So my mission, I think, is going to be unsuccessful.
Oh, man. To me, just got to go farther north or something. Are you going to be like Fairbanks?
Fairbanks,
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've just discovered the equinox, which I think is, well, I hope is this weekend. So I'm hopeful. I think the lights were out last night, but I was in a meeting, so I missed them.
Yeah.
How about you? Where's next on your list?
I don't know, to be honest with you. Like I would never went to Vietnam. That's nowhere in my top 10 list of countries to go. But like, I had an opportunity to go, tour guide and stuff, so I had to, go there, But yeah, I don't know. I'm going to Mexico in January to visit a friend of mine. I've been there before.
I haven't either. Whereabouts are you going?
They live by that tourist town, Puerto Vallarta. I can never say the name.
Yeah.
They live like right 20 miles to the left of it or something, because his wife's actually from there. So
oh, nice.
It'll be a good time. Yeah. I mean, Army, I was all over Europe and stuff, I've never been to South America, Central America, or Africa. So
was that where you were positioned in the army, all over Europe?
Yeah. All over Europe, yeah. So I was in Germany twice, Italy, South Korea, Fort Texas. This is a different name now. In South Carolina, Kansas, and here.
Got it.
Yeah.
And I bet you saw quite different sides of those countries whilst you were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just did a lot of different things. So you're actually from England, correct?
Correct.
And you've been here for like 8 years?
Yeah. Yeah. I moved over 8 years ago. My husband works at Microsoft. And so we had the opportunity to come over. And I think about a year earlier, we'd been on holiday in America and talked about, wouldn't it be fun to move here for a couple of years? And then the opportunity came up, and so we just didn't really think about it that much. We just moved. It was great. It was, I think in hindsight, it was quite a bigger shift than I was expecting. I definitely didn't put enough time into thinking about what the move meant. But yeah, it's been, I mean, we said we would come for 2 years, and now we've been here 8.
Were your kids born here or England?
One kid in England, one over here.
So one American and one British kid.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Although my daughter, who is American, thinks that she has got the most amazing British accent. It goes a bit like this, like, I'm British. And yeah, it's hilarious.
So talk about some like the culture shocks of coming to America from England, like things you weren't expecting or.
Yeah, okay. So I'll tell you, I had thought that the culture would be more similar than it is. There is a lot of difference. In England, there's a lot of what we would call banter. So kind of just back and forwards, like constantly teasing each other. And I haven't noticed that quite so much in America. Like I've started to find more people with that, but it's kind of endemic in England. Like people go to the pub. Actually, the biggest culture shock, I think, is how few places you can take your children in America. Like when we first moved over, we went to like a wine festival in Kirkland. And I got there, and then I discovered that you could only drink wine in the in the over 21 area. Whereas in England, everyone takes their children like to the pub. They'll spend the day in the pub. The children will be playing. That was quite the shock. I think also one thing I've noticed increasingly over time in the US is in England, you can switch, not everybody, but like I have voted for all three political parties in the UK, all three of them over the time that I have been able to vote. Whereas in the US, people tend to they either vote Republican or Democrat, and they don't tend to switch. And that I find quite intriguing and strange.
Yeah, I know each election actually only parties only have to only go after like 10% of the vote, because like others, 40 or whatever is like they're not going to change.
Yeah.
So Britain has like three parties in.
Yeah, I mean there are two main parties, and then there's the Liberal Democrats, and they're probably most similar to the Democrats over here, and they have a small percentage, maybe I don't know, not even 10%.
So how does that work? Like here in the US, like either Republicans or Democrats win. So either somebody have a majority. I'm guessing with three parties to vote for, a lot of times they don't have 50%. So how does it work? Like, so a party wins like less than 50%, and they got to like, how does that work?
Yeah, so when that's happened previously, there was a coalition between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats under David Cameron in about the kind of 2010 timeframe. And that coalition was very strange, just because they were on opposite ends of the spectrum. But I would say this is that I think the difference between the Conservative and Labour and Lib Dem parties in the UK is a lot less. Like there's a lot less difference between them. So things, there's a lot that isn't on the ticket in the UK, like abortion's not on the ticket. There's no gun control, that's never on the ticket. Things like universal healthcare, like if you took that away from people in England, there would be a riot.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, like they just aren't even in politics. And I think one of the challenges now is how do you differentiate between the two parties, because there are a lot of similarities. Obviously, you would never get that between the Democrats and the Republicans here.
Yeah. So are y'all like, you have like do citizenships now, or does that work?
Yeah. So I'm on we're on green cards, and then we've just applied for citizenship. So yeah, we'll see.
So you either keep both of them then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and my husband's also Australian, so he'll have triple citizenship.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you tell your family and friends you're moving to the States, they're like, what are you doing? Don't go over there. Like,
I think they were worried that we were going to move to Australia, and then we moved to America instead.
So that's a little closer.
It is a little closer. Australia is fabulous. It's such a great country. It is a long way away from everywhere. It takes, when we go there, my husband's from Adelaide, and it takes us about 27 hours together. Yeah.
So what's something you miss about England and or Australia?
Ooh, for me, it's friends and family. Those are the main things I miss from England, and just being able to up to someone's house, like, birthdays that you miss, or just going to the pub, like all of those kind of everyday things is what I miss the most. I do also miss the history that you get in the UK, like just being able to go to really old buildings, that kind of thing. In Australia, there's a lot to love about Australia. Adelaide in particular is such a bustling city. Like I was there for work and to visit family last summer, and like just everywhere is bustling, busy, open. Like there were just businesses everywhere, like cafes, bars everywhere. And I think with downtown Seattle, like it still really hasn't come back.
No.
And in Australia, it's almost, they had a very different pandemic experience, but I was completely blown away at what a great city Adelaide is.
Yeah, Vietnam's the same way. It's like a lot of hustle on the bustle, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. So you spent some time at something called KPMG?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's one of the big accountancy firms. When I was growing up, I had no idea what startups were, I knew all of the kind of standard career paths, like teacher, doctor, accountant, lawyer. My mum was a lawyer, so I obviously wasn't going to become a lawyer. I also wanted to travel. And so my parents at the time said to me, the only way you're going traveling is if you have a job to come back to. And so the only types of jobs you could get for that were accounting. So I joined KPMG and I trained as an accountant for 3 years. I was not good at it. But it's a great training experience. Like there's nothing quite like being 21 years old, knowing nothing about accountancy, and then being put in front of a director of finance who makes you feel that small. It was, in many ways, it was the worst experiences of my life, having to do that every single day and not being able to do it well. But it was also a great exercise in resilience. That's all I can say about it. And then as soon as I qualified, I never did accountancy ever again. No.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then you do some healthcare stuff, like policy and strategy in healthcare.
Yeah, so I worked for the Care Quality Commission for I think about 6 years, and it's the government regulator for health and social care in the UK, and they kind of basically check that hospitals, care homes, dentists, doctors are kind of meeting quality standards and within the law, and that was an interesting experience. Again, I didn't have much experience when I started, and a lot of it was around kind of meeting people who actually use those services, like managing stakeholders. But we were at the whims of government. Like I remember working for a year on one thing, like one big kind of regulation framework, and then the government changed and they cancelled it instantly. So it was a year's worth of work from like hundreds of people just gone in a second. But it was a great experience.
So a daughter born here, does he
Yes.
consider herself an American, a British person, or Australian?
So I've got so I was that by my daughter. I've got an English daughter and an American daughter.
Okay. And so how do you, with y'all being in America, how do you make sure they you teach them the culture of the other places you've been to, or is that a losing battle?
We do. I mean, it is in some ways. We do visit fairly regularly. I probably get back to the UK with them maybe once a year, which is really nice. And we spend a few weeks there. One of the benefits, I think, of working remotely for a company is that you can work from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been pretty lucky with that. I mean, in terms of the culture, they're very much American,
Yeah.
but there are, there's a lot of similarities between England and the US at that stage. I think in many ways, if children in the US are a bit more naive and innocent than they are in England, which I really like. So I'd say that. And then, yeah, sometimes we'll kind of fall down a trap of trying to work out who Henry VIII's wives were in order and that kind of stuff. So that's pretty fun.
Yeah. So random question,
yeah,
the first time, I'm going to assume you've been at Outback Steakhouse.
I have.
When you went the first time, you're like, what is this crap? Like this is nowhere close to where we.
Do you know what? It's my dad's favorite US restaurant.
Is it?
Yeah, but I think we've been there once or twice.
Okay.
My favorite used to be Red Lobster.
Okay.
Because we went to America once or twice when I was growing up, and I just loved their cheese scones. And of course now, like no one I know goes to Red Lobster. Same with Outback Steakhouse. But we've got some like that in the UK as well. Like TGI Fridays is basically Outback Steakhouse in England.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great, but sometimes you just got to have it. How about you? Have you got a guilty pleasure, a restaurant that you like going to?
Just anything like pasta, Italian food usually.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We have I think spaghetti factory in England, and it's grim, but it's always busy. I'm like, who is eating there?
Yeah, that's like here in the States that there's a restaurant called Arby's. Like no one ever sees it. Like and like crazy, Arby's just bought another restaurant for $8 billion. Like how they get $8 billion? Like no one sees anyone goes to Arby's. Like
yeah, I know. I feel that way. We did have a challenge to try and go to all the fast food restaurant chains that we could in the US. I think we made it through about half of them, and yeah, there's a lot of bad ones in there.
It's crazy. And then have you ever been to Panda Express?
Yes, once.
So I learned this yesterday, but it's by mistake. You would never guess how much profit they made last year.
Oh God. It's going to be billions.
10 billion.
No.
In profit, yeah.
But those Panda Expresses are never busy.
I don't know. Maybe someone's relying on their paper account. Maybe the account, there's an account doesn't know what they're doing and put the numbers or something, right?
Oh, I don't know. Well, yeah, you said it, not me. But someone must be eating in there. Yeah, very, very odd.
So change the subject. What is it like? What is the Australian startup scene like? People talk about Silicon Valley, Israel. What is it like in Australia?
Yeah, so compared to Silicon Valley and Israel, I'd say the Australian startup ecosystem is maturing. There is a lot of money going into it. There is quite a lot of investment, particularly in Sydney, Melbourne, and also Adelaide. But again, Australia, it is a long way from anywhere. Although one of the things that we were reflecting on at LeapSheep is that we couldn't have built LeapSheep in Silicon Valley or Tel Aviv or London, but we could build it from Adelaide because it was very much an immature startup ecosystem. And in some ways, it's still very much kind of maturing, but it's a long way behind.
Now, is Australia considered part of like the Southeast Asian startup scene? Like they consider like Vietnam, like Korea, and that part of the country, or that's totally separate?
Separate. Yeah, no, quite separate. There are some connections, but not many. Like Australia is quite out there. And if there's any connections with Australia, it's usually into places like Silicon Valley or established ecosystems. I know there's a few schemes in Australia, like landing pads, and those are specifically designed to get Australian startups exposure to Silicon Valley and other startup ecosystems, just to try and build capability. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges because there's a couple of big unicorns in Australia like Canva, Atlassian.
Yeah, Canva is the one everyone knows. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But there's only a couple, and so you've then got the question of, and I think this is true of all developing startup ecosystems, like how do you build true startup expertise when you don't have the ecosystem and kind of all the connections and the decades that Silicon Valley in particular has built. And it's a challenge. Yeah, it's a big challenge. And of course, in many of these new developing startup ecosystems, it's like the Wild West. You've got a ton of well-meaning people who are trying to offer advice, often they're industry experts.
Scammers too, unfortunately,
Yeah. I mean, it is like the Wild West to some degree. And, a couple of times I've been researching investors and then you Google their name and, there's like some charges or felonies against them. And you just think, I would never have known that if I hadn't Googled. And they're still on platforms and they're still on LinkedIn and they're posting. It's tricky. And I think if you were if you were in the accountancy field or the medical profession, you'd be struck off.
Oh yeah.
But there's nothing like that because
there's no certification. Just say I'm an investor. I've got the money, right?
Yeah. Or you say I'm a startup advisor. And like if you're a startup, how can you tell if that person has the right experience? Like how can you tell? It's a big challenge.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. Yeah, there's a lot of scammers out there, a lot of charlatans, so to speak, charge like crazy amounts of money. Like,
I almost think though it's not so much the scammers that are the problem, it's the people who are really well-meaning and they really want to genuinely help
wrong advice.
Founders. Yeah, but they give advice that's worked for them. And of course, and say like
them in year 2012 or something, or
or in a different industry or with a different problem or a different market segment. And it's like, how is a founder supposed to know whether that's going to work for them or not? It's
so many founders like take bad advice and I don't want to say waste 6 months. I guess they learn something, but still, it's like 6 months. Like
it's expensive learning. One of the things that we find, and I guess it's a belief that we have at LeapSheep, is that actually founders are spending a lot of money on support and help, but typically they're spending it on software developers, salespeople, marketing agencies, but they're spending it too early. And so, of course, they either build the wrong thing because they're kind of working with a software developer before they've done any user research with potential customers. And it's like, how can you divert some of that spend so that founders kind of make the best decisions that they can at the time? It's one of the challenges we find. So often I meet founders at events, particularly, obviously I'm in Seattle, so I meet founders at events, and often they're working with 2 or more software developers, and you go, oh, that's great. Like, how many customers have you spoken with? Like, who's your ideal customer? And they struggle to answer it. And you think, how do your software developers know what to build? Like, do you have personas? How do your software developers know who they're building for? Like, it's all of those kind of things. And it's such, and I get so frustrated by it because all the founders that I come across, like, usually they're really passionate. They've got a really clear idea for the problem they want to solve. And it's the same story, like event after event.
Yeah. Or the founder hasn't done the persona research or case and had no idea what to tell the developer to do.
Yeah.
So the founder pays like $20,000 or more, and the developer makes something like completely different.
Yeah.
And so the founder gets frustrated. You didn't build what I want. This is exactly what you want, because founders don't know how to communicate. Developers, they definitely have a different language. They talk,
Yeah.
it's very, very detailed user stories and stuff. Most people like I said before on the podcast, like if you tell a regular person, get up and open the door, open the door. Developer, get up a 20-degree angle, do 19 degrees thrust, put one forward, just so detailed, right? And most people don't communicate like that.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And I think one of the challenges as well is that software developers, like they're really just focused on developing software. And so if you talk to them about who the customer is and try and get them to think through the customer's perspective, or even talk to customers, like usually they can't or won't do it. Yeah, I mean, I've been chatting with a founder who's in our portfolio, and they still don't have a clear persona, and you've got the software developer who's doing a ton of work. And I said, well, why are you doing this work if you don't know
what's that
designing for?
Tech debt, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard one. And I think also the ecosystem exacerbates it. Like if you go to any event and you meet an investor, it's always the VCs that are at the events. And usually it's the early stage startups who are going to the events.
Where's your tech co-founder at? Or where's your tech lead at?
Yeah. Or, like, oh, have you got your product yet? Like, we love it when founders have got 200% like month-on-month growth. And it's like, well, it's great advice if you're talking to like Series B founders, but for early stage, it just exacerbates this
build a product. Doesn't matter if what the customer wants, just build a product.
Yeah.
And so back to angel investor fast. It's my experience. It's like the angel investors who like put on LinkedIn angel investors is like they've never invested ever in their life, right? And the actual angel investors they don't advertise it, right? It's kind of hard to find them. They're interested in them.
It is hard to find them, and the ones we've actually been doing quite a lot of research into angel investors at the moment. And one of the things you find is that often people who are listed as angel investors, often they are associated with a VC. So actually, maybe they have been an angel, but now they're with a VC, or often they're with like an alliance or a group. I'd say it's extremely hard, and I know that there's platforms like Gust and other matching platforms. But it feels like there's a lot of hoops to jump through if you're pre-seed as a founder, particularly pre-seed, to actually find the right investor. You're going to be sending hundreds and hundreds of messages. It's a challenge.
There's so many investors out there now, all these micro VCs, angel investors. It's like you said, Gus, PitchBook, NFX, all these like things out there, right? It's overwhelming, right? But then you got to take the time. Like it's like if you're a founder, you got to research and like who you're going to target, right?
Yeah. And I mean, many founders are lucky enough to have friends and family for their pre-seed, or if you've had especially in this area, if you've had a big payoff from like Microsoft or Amazon or whatever, then you might have enough to get you started. So I think, but I think on the whole, if you don't have those kind of connections or family wealth or well-connected, like friends and family that are willing to take a risk, finding angel investment is a big challenge. It's something I feel increasingly passionate about. One of the ways that we help founders is if they are struggling to raise capital, then we kind of help them with ways to bootstrap. So, can you do some consulting work or sell some projects to extend your runway so that you don't need to raise capital? That's
collect some cans, donate some blood.
Well,
Uber.
Do you know what?
Work at McDonald's.
I have not been suggesting that. Yeah, I mean, a few founders that we've worked with actually have done that extremely successfully, and they've built a massive runway off delivering projects, usually to the customers that they then plan to service with a product. And that's probably the most success that we've had in extending a founder's runway. And the other advantage is that you don't give up equity. And so then, potentially you might earn enough through that side of the business that you can then build your product alongside. And it's also, I mean, there's a lot to it, obviously, and it can be distracting. I mean, it's the model that we've done at LeapSheep is, whilst we have been building our product in the background, we have delivered it manually for subscription revenue. So we've been able to bootstrap to date. It's been quite painful, but it's been worth it, I think.
So you might not know this, but the name LeapSheep, does that mean anything, or is it just a random name that was picked?
Definitely not a random name. I often get asked this question. So it's based on the premise that, there's a lot of sheep in a pack. Like, how do you leap over? And that's really the premise. Interestingly, though, we've kind of moved into a different analogy, which is, if you're an investor, you have to pick a winner. You have to look and try and work out which founder, which idea, which team is going to be the one that kind of becomes the unicorn. Whereas actually our philosophy is that you don't have to pick winners. Like, you can grow and build and develop and support many, many, many founders, and therefore creating more winners. And so the LeapSheep one, the way I'm thinking about it now is like, well, okay, there's a lot of sheep. Why can't all of them leap?
Okay.
That's the first time I said that out loud. I'm not sure I'll say it again.
So I think on your website, it says we'll reduce the billions of dollars of capital that are wasted every year by startups. Like, how do y'all get this number of billions of dollars? Like, where did that number come from?
Yeah, sure. So there's some research that's been done on the number of new startups a year, and it's around 5 million startups. And of that, and again, we've as with any founder, when you are kind of doing your market research, you're going to be able to find a ton of data, and you're also going to have to make some assumptions. So of that 5 million, about 1 million of those tend to be in our hypothesis is about 1 million of those 5 million are spending around $100,000 in their first year of being a startup. And they're spending it on software developers, marketing agencies, legal fees, accounting fees, and whoever that is on their first team. And much of that spend is being misallocated. Like, it's being spent too early, like we've talked about, or just on the wrong thing.
Yeah, I know when I started out, I spent so much money on stuff I was trying to have, like one time I bought a sales platform. I was nowhere near doing sales, but it was like, oh, buy it now, get 80% off. 6 months later, I never used it one time.
Yeah.
So like, that's a waste of money.
Yeah.
And so many people do that.
Yeah.
And that's, you got so many people out there, like developers, marketing people. They think they know what they're doing, but they really don't, right? So like, you're paying money for a service, a product, they don't deliver, right?
Yeah.
But they think they know what they're doing, and like they're not delivering. Like hire a marketing person. I need a marketing plan, and they give you some like crap. Like, I could have done this. Like,
yeah. And also, I think the challenge is that most marketing agencies in particular, like, yes, there are some very good ones, but many of them are doing it for established business. And established business tends to know who their customer is. Yeah. They've been repeatedly selling to that customer. They know what language resonates with them. They know what their product is, what the benefits are. Whereas if you're an early stage founder, a lot of that you still are learning, and it's changing all the time. And sometimes you don't know. Like, so I'm always surprised sometimes when I ask founders and say, what is, and I like to call it a pants on fire problem. Like, what is the pants on fire problem that you're solving? And much of the time, founders can't answer that because often you start with an idea or a solution idea, and then you try and then think, well, okay, well, I think this is a great idea. Therefore, other people will think it's a great idea. And often it takes a ton of time to find that niche segment that is really got that problem and is willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I have a good friend, Alan Gonzalez. He's a startup founder. He does a called DevMatch. He explains, like, if you're a startup founder, you need to provide a painkiller, not a vitamin.
Absolutely.
And to me, startup founders providing vitamins.
Yeah.
And not a painkiller.
Yeah. And sometimes when you ask what the painkiller, what the pain is, people will explain it as a gain. And it takes a bit of time, I think, for the penny to drop that actually people aren't paying for a gain.
Yeah.
Something like Facebook or Instagram or wherever, like, that's, I guess, a gain, depending on how you look at it. But I'm accessing that for free. Yeah. Would I pay for it? Probably not. Whereas, you do pay when a pain becomes so great and so big, you will pay to solve it. It's as simple as that.
What's the definition of a startup? I mean, what is a startup?
Yeah. So my favorite definition is Steve Blank's, which is it's a temporary organization that's searching for a repeatable business model. And to me, that summarizes a startup. The other element of being a startup is, it's typically a product-based company. So something that if it scales and gets to that exponential growth, then you have that massive gap between kind of what it costs to run the business and then actually the returns that you get. So I think that's the other core element of a startup. And it's disruptive. Like, startups should be disruptive. Otherwise they're entrepreneurs.
So when does a startup go from being a startup to lack of a better term, a real business?
That is a very good question. So, and I would suggest, and again, this is a tough one, because if you think about kind of previous startups that I would call are now very much established businesses, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all of them were startups once, but now they're very much established. I'm not going to give you a technical definition here. But I would say, like, once you have found product market fit and you have scaled to a certain extent, and then you go into operation mode, right? Like, when you're not, the innovation and the disruptive side is to a certain extent kind of on the back burner and you're operating that business model, that's when I think you'd call it an established business.
So next one, when, of course, you start off, you got to do product market fit, MVP, or like beta testing. When should a founder switch from like startup mode, MVP, et cetera, to like full out scaling?
Yeah. So there's two parts to that question. So product market fit it's a long journey to get to it. You know, you need to have a customer segment, or like we call it a beachhead. I think Bill Olet kind of coined the term beachhead, but you know, you need a niche beachhead market that has the problem that they are willing to pay to solve that problem, and you have a solution that completely solves that problem, meets their needs. And then, of course, you need to kind of go into the stage where you're learning and learning and learning. So, you know, does your product technically work? Do your customers get the benefits that you said they do? Are they engaging with it? And is it sticky? Are you able to acquire customers repeatedly and at scale? That's kind of all the side on the innovation side. But then there's also the really important aspect, which is the business model side. So before you scale, you need to make sure that you have got a business model that's worth scaling. So, you know, is your customer acquisition costs less than, like significantly less than your lifetime value? You know, what's your gross margin? Like all of these kind of metrics, and making sure that you've got the metrics right, so that if you scale, then you scale a decent business model. I mean, there are examples of where bad business models have scaled, like Twitter is a great example. You know, Twitter's, I don't know what their current profit margin is, but, you know, they've struggled to make a profit despite having a ton of money poured in. Same with YouTube. Like YouTube actually scaled and then found a business model that was worthy of scale. So, you know, there are instances where you can scale before you reach product market fit and before you get the metrics. But typically, it's better to make sure that you've reached product market fit and got good metrics first. Otherwise, you're just burning money.
Okay. So this is like an exaggeration. It's like some people in the startup world, they'll tell founders, you know, fail fast, right? You know, if you don't have like, you know, product market fit, blase, $1 million revenue by 3 months, just shut it down. Other people like, you know, never quit. Don't care if it takes 10,000 years, keep on going, right? I mean, it has to be a balance, right? You can't, you know, like what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, my thought, it's a fabulous question. My thought on it is that sometimes because VCs are investing earlier and earlier in startups, like it's counterintuitive, but they're, you know, if you think about what VCs need, they need to be able to deliver returns to their LPs. And so, of course, they want startups in their portfolio to be able to scale, to show growth, to get more revenue, all of these things. And so actually what it means is, do you know what? Now I've started on that route, I'm completely forgotten the question. Can you go back to it? I've just gone on a tangent.
Yeah. So like some people in the startup world will say, you know, like fail fast. Like if you don't have like, you know, $1 million of revenue within 90 days, shut it down. And the other end, like, you know, never quit. I don't care for like 20,000 years, keep on going.
So there's definitely a balance in the middle. And I think the fail fast methodology, I think it's quite dangerous. And I think people wear it as a bit of a badge of honor. I'd say, you know, it typically takes 7 to 10 years for any founder that actually makes it to an exit event to get there. It takes a lot longer than any founder thinks when they start the journey of building a startup. And there's also the other option, which is that you may not ever get to an exit event, but you actually might get a profitable, you know, company that's kind of worth continuing, but never gets that hyper growth. But the challenge is that it takes time to learn who your customer is, learn what marketing works, what doesn't, and run all these different experiments, that kind of build, measure, learn cycle that's very much part of the lean startup, and actually having the patience and the perseverance and the grit to continue down that path until you get to product market fit.
So if you listen to the news, you know, all the like publicity, you know, everyone's raising millions of dollars, fundraising stuff. There's, you know, all this VC money out there. But reality, less than 1% raise money, right?
It's true.
Why is there such a myth out there, right? And saying like so many founders probably waste time, you know, trying to raise money when they're not fundable, right?
Yeah. I think one thing I've noticed is, you know, if you go to a startup event, sometimes you'll get someone who's made it, like, you know, a successful founder who's raised, you know, they've potentially created a unicorn, and they'll kind of talk through the story of kind of how they got there and all the challenges and the times that they almost shut the business down, but they kept going. And of course, they reached this success. And it obviously you need hope as a founder. Like you need hope that you're going to get to that. That's what we're all on this journey, right? But it also exacerbates and makes it harder, I think, for founders to fail unless they really have kind of given everything and stopped.
Yeah, can you see the articles on Crunchbase Geek all the time? Random founder raised $10 million or whatever, but like maybe two paragraph blurb. In reality, there's probably a book could be written about all the failures, all the people they probably had like a team of 6 people now. They probably went through 25 people. Definitely people don't talk about either, like all the people you go through, right? Because like it takes a lot of fundraise. Most people can't work for you for free, right?
No.
So usually, I think after 6 months, they roll it out. So then you lose all expertise they had. You got to start all over again. And then VC like, man, you've had like such high turnover. Why? Because you won't give them no money to pay them.
Yeah. It's a tough challenge, and that's one of the reasons why where it's appropriate and where we can, we help founders with a different revenue stream so that they can fund themselves in order to build the business. I mean, it's not right for everybody. It's hard. It's hard, and I think it's only getting harder. Like after Silicon Valley Bank, I think one of the repercussions of that is that there's a lot of new solutions being built to do more screening, like more hoops for founders to jump through to help investors pick winners.
Yeah.
And you just think it's going to make it even harder for good founders to raise. And there's the other element, which is like, if we could just make more great founders with the right knowledge and information to actually really help them and to reduce their risks and manage their resources, like that's surely the better option.
I know another thing, like a lot of VCs, like you might go to them and like do a pitch, and you'll say, I need 300,000. Like I can't do enough for you. I'd invest $3 million, right? I mean, I think some founders need like 20, 50, $100,000, right? Go the next step.
Yeah, it's true. Do you know what, the working out the amount that you need to raise is challenging, because typically
I struggle with that all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the principle we tend to work from is you want to really give yourself 18 months of runway so that you're not constantly fundraising.
18 months with everything you want, like all the people you want, all the toy, the bells and whistles, because the difference between buying the premium HubSpot and like doing cold email yourself, right?
Yeah, it's true. And really you want to raise the smallest possible amount, so that you don't dilute yourself too much until you've kind of reached the next milestone and reached the next level of traction. It's an extremely hard challenge.
And I guess you can't say when you pitch to someone, they say, how much you're raising? You can't say, whatever you give me.
No.
I'll raise whatever you give me.
No. And I think the other counterintuitive thing about fundraising is that you really don't want to say that you're fundraising.
Yeah.
It's all about building relationships with investors, just for the future, and making and kind of really understanding which investors will be appropriate to go back to. I mean, a few of the companies that we have worked with, they've been smart enough to do all of that relationship building. And so they're in a position where they've got investors that want to invest in them, and they're saying, nah, we're okay for now, thanks.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's an ideal situation to be in, but it's highly unlikely that most founders are in that position.
Yeah. And there's so much about fundraising they don't tell you, right? Like an investor might tell you no, and you think, it's because they don't like me or it's not my product, but it's reality is because they have no more dry powder. I think it's the term, right? Dry powder.
Dry powder, yeah.
Yeah. And then and this is what I always thought was bad advice. So when I first started, I was told, if you pitch an investor to tell you no, don't ask the investor for introductions, because no one's going to invest.
Yeah.
But my thing was if the investor said no because they had no dry powder, why are we not making the introduction?
Yeah. The other element that's really critical is, do you fit into their investment thesis? Because if you don't fit into their investment thesis, then it's always going to be no.
Yeah. To me, that's on the founder, right? Because you have to do some research. I mean, pretty much every VC, or not maybe not angel investment, VCs they have somewhere, I invest B2B at A round, or I invest this amount of money, I do this, or I only invest in people of color. There's always, it's out there. You might have to do a little bit of research, but it's out there.
Yeah, the information is out there. I do think though, if you meet an investor in an event, you're probably going to try and pitch to them anyway, because you haven't had the opportunity to do that research. But as you say, the information is out there. You just got to look for it and find it. And if you reach out to an investor and you're not in their investment thesis, then it does make you look a little foolish. Yeah.
Can you think if you're an investor, I mean, people don't realize how many emails they get every day. I'm imagining, right? I mean, you get hundreds, probably thousands of emails from random people, because did you meet Pablo Casim?
Yes.
So he's
Yeah, I
on a
did.
podcast. He's
Yeah.
telling me that he gets all the time emails like, this random stuff, right? Like not even close to their thesis, right?
Yeah.
He's like, no, of course he has the answer, right? But yeah, he says like half his emails every day like this, code emails like nowhere even close. Like,
Yeah. I do wonder if founders are trying to just kind of hit as many VCs or investors as they can with the
yeah,
same type of email and just hope that something sticks.
yeah. I mean, it's a flawed sales process, right? I mean,
Yeah.
basically just sales process.
Exactly. It's a sales process. And of course, you've got to do that kind of marketing. One of the things that we started encouraging founders to do is actually developing like short form video content that you can kind of quickly get up, because then that gets information about you and what you believe in the public domain. And particularly if you're seeking angel investors, like it can be a really great way of finding people who may have money to invest, but may not have traditionally thought about themselves as startup investors. And of course, then they can get to know you, get to know your beliefs, like see if there's a fit before you've even met each other.
I mean, your dentist could be a potential angel investor, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, if think about how many high net worth individuals that there are in Seattle.
Oh yeah.
I met a man last week who's building a database of high net worth individuals in the UK. Because like if you think about investors, typically they're saturated with all of these deals, whereas you have all these people who have become wealthy and who have potentially money that they want to invest. How do they find good deal flow? So I'm hoping something like that will come up in the US, like a network of high net worth individuals that have not previously invested in startups, but would if there was something that was particularly their passion.
Yeah. Now, so are y'all mainly dealing in Seattle, or y'all do stuff all across the United States?
All over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah, we've got our head office is based in Adelaide in South Australia, but we have customers in the US, in the UK, Europe, India, Australia, all over. Typically developing countries, because we're a subscription. Obviously the subscription price is typically something that's met by founders in developing countries. But yeah, we're all over. We're agnostic to industry, technology, geography, all sorts.
What's the upcoming like startup city that's kind of under the radar right now?
Oh, I mean, there are so many. One of the interesting ways to think about that actually is through Founders Live, which I think we've been out together. Yeah. So, I mean, they're starting to host events in like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, like all of these cities all over the world. And you would never have typically thought of them as startup locations. But, now it's so cheap. It can be so cheap to build, like, there's no code software. Like you really can build a startup from anywhere in the world. It's an exciting time. And I mean, I'm not an expert on kind of developing ecosystems. I think Startup Genome is quite good for that. But I always find it exciting to read about these new up and coming places.
What's what's the startup industry that's out there that excites you? Like a new tech, like maybe AI or VR, or what's like a new tech out there that excites you?
So, I mean, generative AI I find completely fascinating, but then doesn't everybody? I think the challenge is that there are industries for whom there doesn't exist the data yet to make use of generative AI. But I think what's coming in the next few years is going to be just mind blowing, I think. But one of the most exciting things for me, I reckon, is industries which haven't really been touched by tech. Like, advertising has been completely transformed by technology. But you think like construction, I was kind of anticipating that by now there'd be 3D printed houses everywhere. Because, in Dubai, they 3D printed a skyscraper about 6 or 7 years ago. And I'm like, where are the 3D printed houses? And they're still very, very niche. So I think those industries that have not been transformed by tech, that's, I think, where there's going to be a lot of really exciting developments. I mean, my passion is climate tech. Like,
Climate tech.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's the one thing that if we can really get that right, it's going to be transformative. I think Elon Musk, with his investments in like SpaceX and building SpaceX and Tesla, like you've kind of got the like interplanetary side of things to a certain extent started off, and then also this planet. I'm hopeful to be able to stay on this planet, but we'll see.
So next, talk about how y'all help people with pitch deck development.
Yeah, sure. So pitch deck development is an interesting one because there's so many places you can go to find the pitch decks of Airbnb and Uber, all of these big kind of tech companies. But the challenge with a pitch deck is that it's the business model design that sits underneath it, which is so damn hard. Like it's extremely difficult to design and develop that business model, and then to present it in and do the storytelling. Like the storytelling, the business model design and the storytelling is the most challenging part of the pitch. Like, you know, the slides themselves, if you have those two things right, then they can kind of speak for themselves. And so a lot of what we do, so at LeapSheep, we one of the things that we do is we support founders to develop their pitches and the business model that sits underneath it. And so we run those as 10-week programs. And they're literally, you get kind of guided through this business model design process. And it's not, you know, just to kind of go through it in a linear fashion. You've kind of got to go back and go back. And it really, the pitch, one of the benefits of your pitch is it's really everything you know about your business in one place and presented in a way that is compelling to individuals. I mean, the place that we start is usually really all about who your customer is. You know, who's your customer? What's their problem? What are their jobs to be done? What do they want to be successful? And how is your solution going to help them in a way that competitors can't? And that's, in many ways, that's the easy part. The harder part is the business model design, the unit economics and the metrics, and particularly like developing your flywheel. And that flywheel is really, you know, once you kind of start to pick up customers, kind of, you know, make your product better and better, how are you going to turn that flywheel to help you to find more customers, more partners, make your solution better? And then that flywheel really starts to spin. And so that's probably one of the most surprising elements that founders get when we work with them on their pitch.
So I know a few years ago, I think I got named Guy Kawasi had this like the 10 pitches, 3 bullet points. Now most pre-seed founders have like slide decks, like 15 or 20, maybe even 25 slides. You know, like is it like a perfect? I'm sure the answer depends. Is there like a goal somewhere should go?
Yeah. So David Rose has got a really good training course on this. I mean, we've got our own ideas, but and methodology. But it's kind of like one to throw, so like one to give in advance, which is your kind of pitch teaser or pitch deck, which has to be read in less than like a minute or two because you're trying to grab someone's attention. Then you've got your like the first pitch, and typically kind of around 10 slides maximum, really, and that's really designed as a hook to get to a next meeting. And then if you get that next meeting, then that's when you can have your 20-page kind of all singing, all dancing, and
indexes and all that kind of stuff, and
exactly.
like all the research and details. And...
Yeah. So you want to, and again, we talk a lot about designing a customer experience, and that works to both your customer. So what's the experience that they have from when they first find out about you, all the way through to kind of starting with you, and then being able to tell other people about you. And the same is true for investors. You want to design a customer experience for investors. And as you said earlier on, it's a bit like a sales process. Like, you know, you want to manage that sales process.
So how does a founder like know or find out what put in each of those pitches, right? Because I'm going to presume you don't want to put your financials as an intro pitch, right?
You want to, it's a great question. So you want to put into a first pitch, typically an investor will want to see financial projections. And the way that we suggest to do this to founders is you want to have kind of a very high level profit and loss that is based on hypotheses. And so those hypotheses have to be really clearly stated. So if we reach this milestone, or if our acquisition strategy works as we think, these are what our projections are. Because then, you know, one of the biggest challenges is that people hold startups to account on their financial projections. It's like, I'm still developing my business model. Like, how can I possibly?
That's right.
Yeah. And I mean, really, if you're making these kind of projections, anything more than a year in advance is complete. It's just best guess.
Yeah. What's it called? MS University, made shit up university.
Yeah. Well, I mean, admittedly, there's a lot of work that goes into those financial projections.
Even they all made up.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all hypotheses.
The math still has to add up, right?
Yeah. It's all hypotheses. And the challenge comes, like, I think at one point before Tesla was kind of really on the up a few years ago, you had analysts that were really kind of holding into account against financial projections.
Yeah.
And you think, well, like, you know, how can they be expected?
Yeah, people forget for a little bit, Tesla was like on the borderline of like shutting down. Like, I mean, they were like danger close of not being a company.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. That was about the time when I wish I had invested in Tesla. I always said I really should invest in Tesla, never did.
Yeah, so my take is like I always said, like pitch decks are like resumes, right? Like if you're looking for a job, you send a resume to 25 people, get 25 opinions. I think pitch deck's the same. Then you pitch deck to 25 people.
Yeah.
And the only opinions that matters are VCs. And how are you going to know that opinion is like your network, right? And like relationship building.
I don't know if I'd agree with that.
No? Okay.
So one of the big challenges that we often help founders unpick is that you get all this different feedback from these different people. And then you end up trying to tackle it all and you have a Frankenstein pitch, like just completely mismatched, doesn't work. And it's the same if you ask loads of different people about your product. If you get feedback from all sorts of, your friends, your neighbors, then you end up with a Frankenstein product. Yeah. And again, not saying that an investor feedback is not appropriate or important or useful, because often it is, but you want to get feedback from a lot of people who are your target investor range, with whom you fit in their investment thesis, because that is the feedback that really matters. Okay. And then you want to look for the patterns, because if one person asks for one thing and one person asks for another, you can't possibly do it all. No. You have to look for those.
You're saying like pretty much like make a decision and do your pitch deck.
Yeah, unless there's a bug in it or like something that like an investor goes, well, that's just wrong. Like, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I remember one time we put a sentence into one of our pitches, and it was something like, forget everything you know about startups. And we actually got some feedback from Minda Bruce, if you know her from First Row, and she's like, well, that actually sounds kind of, it puts my back up that you've said that. Because like, I know a lot about startups. Like, it annoys me that you've told me to forget it. And so that's one thing I thought, okay, that will be one thing that we change when we next update our pitch.
One thing that's always been pet peeve of mine, like you go to pitch competitions, right? And the rules are, the founder pitch will say like 3 minutes, only 10 slides, right? And you get all the rest, like you should have this and you should have that in there. Yeah. And like you saw the rules the same, there's no way you put all this information in a 3-minute pitch, right?
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the pitch competition format is a challenging one, I think, because every pitch competition is a little different. You have different people at them. Really, from my point of view, the point of a pitch competition is it's just helpful to get practice in pitching in public. And, it's like I'm on a podcast. Like, the more conversations you have, the better you get at explaining your story or the problem that you're solving.
I could be wrong. I don't think anyone's got investment from winning a pitch, right?
No, I don't think so.
I'm sure. Of course, you need to build in public, so practice your pitch, get your stuff out there. But I don't think, oh man, that's a great pitch. Let me invest like X amount of money,
I mean, it might get if an investor likes what they're hearing from, it might put them in your mind. Yeah. You might get a meeting. I'd be interested to know what the data is on that, because so many accelerator models are predicated on the demo day or the pitch. Yeah. And I'd be interested to see that data point, like of all of the founders that present at those demo days, how many of them result in capital? I don't know what that answer is. I don't know if that data exists, but it'd be interesting.
So speaking of accelerators, there's somebody out there, right? Some accelerators and incubators, some, I think New Chip just closed down recently, that was a bad thing. Is there such a thing as a founder doing too many of these?
As a what? A founder?
A founder doing too many accelerators.
Oh.
Because they basically all do the same thing, right? That's one mistake I've had with too many of these things in the past.
The challenge, I think, with accelerator programs is they, in order to get into them, like you have to find one that is specific to the industry that you're in, the stage that you're at, like there's all these specifics around an accelerator. And of course, many of them take equity. And so founders often, without quite realizing how expensive equity can be in a later stage, give up this equity without really understanding what value they're going to get from the accelerator program. And then once you're in it, if it's an amazing accelerator, then fantastic, but then it's time limited. So then at the end of the accelerator, you kind of drop off a cliff. Yeah. And so then like many founders that we've come across are like, I wasn't really sure what to do next because
they have
of that experience.
7% of your company. They might give you $120,000. It's like, like you said, if you make it 127%, like that's millions and millions of dollars,
Yeah. And the other issue about them is that often they're quite cookie cutter. So, it doesn't matter what your context is, your experience, your background, your skills, like the progress that you've made, you're almost certainly going to go through the same experience as everyone else. And that experience has been designed before you were selected to go on the program. And so it may or may not be what a founder actually wants. And there's a lot of bias in these accelerator programs. Don't get me wrong, there are some really good accelerators. And again, there's a lot of really well-meaning and experts that are on them. But on the whole, I think founders deserve a better level of personalization than they typically get.
Yeah. So talk about founders doing market research, how important that is.
Yeah, sure. So market research is when founders first start, some of the core elements that it's worth knowing is, and again, you really want to start with your vision for your company. Like, what's the massive transformative impact that you want to have, say, 20 years from now? And that gives you really your North Star that you're aiming for. And it also is compelling to bring people on the journey with you. But then in terms of the market research, you want to understand, like, the industry that you're planning on getting into. Like, what are the trends? Are there trends that mean that your timing is about right? Are you too early? Might you be too late? Who are your competitors? Like, how are they solving the problem, and in what ways do they fall short? And those are some of the big things that it's worth doing your market research on. The other element is, what's the size of the market? Like, if it's a growing market, or like with Airbnb, they resegmented other markets in order to create a new market that wasn't previously spending on staying in a stranger's house. Like, that's kind of complete segmentation. They built a market. And it's worth knowing what kind of market you go into. Like Steve Blank talks about the 4 types of markets, and you want to be really clear what they are. For us, we're actually, for LeapSheep, we would consider ourselves going into an existing market, which is startup founders, but we're going in with a new product. Like, it's a expert subscription support service. Like, founders are not looking to buy that. So of course, there's been an element of education that we've had to do in order to kind of make what we help founders with attractive. And we're still, a lot of the time, we're still educating now.
So what's a startup idea out there that's like, you thought, like, I mean, you probably say this, I like, there's no way to make this is the craziest idea ever. There's no way to make, and then actually, like, they like, oh crap, they're actually like making it, so to speak.
Ooh. So I don't know if I have an answer for that. Typically, whenever we've met a founder, there's never been an idea which I have thought is so crazy that it's not possible. One thing that I have found, though, is that the more you dig into the idea, you might need to think about a bit more about who the customer is or what the product is. And so rather than it being a crazy idea, one of the things is actually, how can you make this so that it's an idea and a problem that's worth solving? I don't think I've ever come across an idea that I've just gone, that'll never work.
Okay.
Well, now I'm going to spend the next week thinking about that.
So next, talk about user research and the importance of that.
Yeah. Okay. So user research is possibly my favorite topic. Almost no.
That's kind of like your specialty, right?
Yeah. It certainly is. So, and just so we're clear on what user research actually is as well. So if you go and talk to your customers or potential customers, and you tell them about your solution, like you say, this is what I've built, this is what I've developed, this is what I'm thinking of, what do you think? That's the exact opposite of user research. What user research is all about is really interviewing or like having a really deep conversation with people who you think are your customers to really understand, what are they doing day to day? Like, what, and we call this, what are your jobs to be done? Like, what are they doing? What are they spending their time on? What does success look like for them? And again, whether that's at work or in their life, like whatever the context is that's relevant for your startup idea. And then the big question is what are some of the biggest challenges or the things that are stopping you from being successful? And really going into detail about what those challenges or problems are or impediments are, and working out and asking them, like, what's the impact of that problem? What's the, how often is it a problem? Is it really big and significant and frequent, which is ideal? Or is it, perhaps a smaller problem, but it's repetitive and it's annoying? And then understanding how existing solutions fall short. And it's a framework that we've put together, but I think, there's we've taken elements from other frameworks and merged them. But the point of user research is that you should be interviewing as many customers as you can to deeply understand, where are their patterns of problems? Like, where are their patterns of problems that in a customer that is representative of a market, that you can then develop a solution concept that you can then go back and test with the people that you've spoken with. And almost no one's doing it. And the joy of it is that you get this deep customer understanding that almost no one else has because they haven't bothered to put the time in and done the work. Steve Blank calls it like get out of the building and talk to your customers.
Yeah.
And it's and the honest truth is that founders, if they skip this step, they're going to be going back to it. Like, unless you're lucky enough to have found customers that are literally trying to pull your product from you, and don't we all wish that we were in that situation? Like, if you don't do your user research, it's going to trip you up in the future. You're going to design the wrong thing, or you're going to build something that no one wants. And so user research, if there's one thing I would say to founders everywhere, make sure you're doing that user research and that you're cataloging what you learn, and you're doing your analysis so that you make sure you build something that the market wants.
And that's to be done before you even start building anything, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Of course, most people don't do that.
Almost no one. I think there's a statistic, I think about 11% of people do it. And even that, I doubt it's proper user research. And how you know if you're not doing it right is if you go out and you talk to customers about what you're building, and they're like, oh, that's interesting, that's great. You have zero validation that they're going to pay or that they care. And so many founders I meet, they're focused on that launch. Like, I'm going to launch that MVP. I'm going to launch it. But actually your MVP, really, I wish Eric Ries had not called it minimum viable product, because really it's your solution concept. Your first MVP should be the concept that you share back with your potential customers and get validation that it solves their problems and that they would pay to use it.
Can you talk about beta testing next?
Yeah, I mean, we don't particularly use the term beta testing that much, just because there's kind of two aspects to it. So one, which is, how can you cheaply and quickly get a prototype or a concept into the hands of your customers? They can play with it. They can see how it would work. I guess technically that's the first element of beta testing. But then there's also the next bit, which is once you have that validation that it's worth building a product because your potential customers want it and they're just waiting for you to give it to them. And the next stage is, right, okay, well, once you have paying customers, then you're in testing mode again, and continuously every time you make an update, so that you can kind of understand, like, how are they using it? What are they using it for? Does it technically work? Is it helping your customers to be successful? Because if it's not, then in the jobs to be done that you understood and learned, then there's no validation that you're going to be able to sell to more customers, or that they'll keep using it and they won't churn. So it's just kind of constant iteration, experiment, and testing. And it's very hard, I think, to have the diligence and the processes to do it well.
So your customer startups, but you have a perfect customer, like a certain revenue startup, pre-seed startup, of course, like the perfect customer, so to speak.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned earlier, we will work with really any startup founder or any entrepreneur. Our ideal customer is what we would call a go-getter customer. They're typically very early stage, pre-product, pre-revenue, and that's really our sweet spot. That's kind of a lot of our product is built to service and support founders who are in those early stages, particularly. And one of the problems that we think we solve is there's no playbook at the moment for startups, and we are building that playbook, and we're doing it by kind of testing it manually with subscribers, kind of working out what works, what doesn't, kind of including elements of diagnostics and interventions in there to support founders. Having said that, we've got a number of subscriber customers who've been with us for years, and they're very much in that kind of hitting product market fit and then starting to scale their growth. So whilst I would say our ideal customer is go-getter founders, we work with any founders.
So these customers have been with you for a long time. Is there a point where you say, okay, founder Jason, you've been with us like 25 years, you might want to think about doing something else?
So I think the longest customer that we have is 5 years. Richard Kwan, who's the CEO of Kiratech. And we met him when he was pretty young. He came onto the startup scene in Adelaide, and he said, I'm going to build $1 billion company from Adelaide. I'm the first $1 billion company. And he told us kind of a few years later that kind of everyone kind of laughed and was like, there's no way you're going to do that. Who is this guy? But over the time, we've worked with him on 4 different startups, all under the Kiratech banner, but kind of he's done like 4 big pivots. And the element that we're helping him with now is actually building out his leadership team, kind of embedding the metrics that he needs to be able to demonstrate scale, and helping him to really reach product market fit in order to scale. And we've also helped him with that whole bootstrapping thing. So he's really been bootstrapping for the last couple of years and doing really well as a result of it. So I think often founders stay with us for a long time because we have that element that's built into our model, which is really that kind of challenge, that coach, but also the diagnostics. It's like, well, how do you know what the next thing you have to work on is? And usually founders don't know because there's no playbook. And so that's what we are doing at LeapSheep, is helping them with that playbook, and then also helping them to meet their goals and get to product market fit and then scale.
So do founders find you, or you all find the founders?
A mixture. Typically, we have most of our subscribers come from referrals from existing customers. Sometimes we meet people at events, and we've just started to invest a bit more in LinkedIn marketing. And I've just done my first TikTok video this morning. And that's a bit of an experiment, really. So a bit of both. So sometimes we contact founders, sometimes they find us. But it's quite interesting because now that I have been going to events in Seattle for the last kind of year or two, sometimes founders will come up to me now, which is kind of nice. I'm not a sales person. Like I hate the concept of sales. I'd rather just help a founder, and then if they end up subscribing to LeapSheep, then great. And if they don't, then at least I've given them some help.
So is this a true or false statement?
Yes.
Build it and they will come.
False. False. Unless you preface it with do your market research and then your user research and then test your solution concept and then build it and they will come. And of course, there's the marketing element there, which is you need to make sure you've got your marketing that resonates with your customer problems. I think I answered that.
Yes. So how do you take care of yourself?
I've got 2 daughters who I absolutely love spending time with. So spending time with them is always a bit of a joy. I'm outside of the kind of toddler and small child age, so it's just at that sweet spot where they're great to hang out with. I love hiking, so I try and fit that in as much as I can. And I play tennis, I run, and I really like lake swimming. So I try and fit as much of those kind of things into my life as I can. It's a bit challenging. I don't know about you, but when I'm at home, I tend to turn on the laptop and start working. I think it's just part of being in a startup. I could do this, I could do that. So I have to force myself to get out of the house in order to stop working.
And your company is a fully remote company, right?
Yeah, fully remote.
Can you talk about some of the challenges? I guess talk about the pros and cons of being a remote company.
Yeah. So I'm an extrovert. So being in a remote company is hard for me. And I manage that by having my fill of talking to people at events and we use Zoom. The benefits of being remote is that we're not limited by geography in terms of who we can hire, who we can take on as a subscriber. Like we can literally take on any founder anywhere in the world because we're fully remote. So that's great. And then the other thing that we work really hard on is our team culture. We've got we've fully embedded agile in our team. So, we have stand-ups like 3 days a week. We have showcase and retrospectives. And one of the ways that I think we promote a really good culture is by kind of calling out like appreciations and also company successes, things we could do better at each retrospective. And so every 2 weeks, if not more than that, you kind of get an opportunity to feel good about the work that you've done or to thank somebody for the work that they've done. And I mean, tools like Miro, Slack, Dropbox, Trello, Zoom in particular, have made it so easy to work remotely. Having said that, I do miss working in an office.
So every 2 weeks, I do like the successful thing.
Yeah. So you basically showcase anything that we've released in the sprint. And then we'll the format we use is like what successes have we or our customers had in the sprint? What things haven't gone quite so well, and kind of why has that been? We call out any ahas that we've had. So sometimes we're like you're in the shower and you go, that thing about the investment thesis. It's like why? I really need to only be speaking to investors whom I fit with their investment thesis. Like that's a great aha. So we'll call that out at a retrospective, and then appreciations. And then the other thing we do is we have kind of very clear values, and we call out kind of evidence and examples of people who have demonstrated those values in the team in the sprint. And then, of course, that leads people to see what good looks like. And of course, more people want to embody the values. And so it's kind of a self-perpetuating good culture.
Yeah. I mean, I would never do this, but I think a good practical joke would like do the opposite. Like one time, like to call out somebody's failures, Jason jacked this up totally. He cost us $2 million,
Yeah. I mean, that's the challenge. One thing that I find really interesting and I really like is often in companies, if something goes wrong, it's easy to blame an individual.
Yeah.
Whereas typically, especially in a startup, like, everyone's trying their best, everyone's working hard. Often it's good to call out where, perhaps you haven't got the systems in place for something, or, a message isn't landing. And so, whereas it might be, it's the way that you talk about something that hasn't gone well. I mean, a 2 million issue is a problem. Yeah. But it's quite a nice way of doing it. And then if there are any performance issues, then we call them out individually in one-on-ones, but not in front of the whole team.
What time zone do you all run the company off of?
We are on an Australian time zone.
That must suck for you.
Yeah, so I work. Yes, in fact, my working day typically starts my meetings rather start at 3 o'clock, and they go through till about 10 in the evening. But I also have customers.
At least that's not 3 in the morning. It's in them.
Yes, yeah. So I don't start any earlier than 7, and I don't work any later than 10 typically. Yeah. But then I've also got customers in the UK and in the US. Mm-hmm. So I can often be in meetings kind of all, like quite a long of the way through from 7 till 10.
So how do y'all take care of your customers?
Yeah, sure. So we have, when you say take care, I'm about to explain how we do what we do. Yeah, okay. So we have kind of 3 core parts to our model. We have structured mentoring, and that's really designed. We have trained startup experts who we've trained on our systems that we have built over time.
So how do you validate this as actually a trained expert? Like, how's that work?
Yeah, so how we have done it to date, which is different from how we'll do it in the future. But we spent 7 years researching startup best practice and then codifying it into a system with 4 pathways. And then we have so some of our team have had experience with multiple startups, and some of us, like me, LeapSheep is the first startup that I have worked in. And so I have trained myself and to being a startup, expert startup advisor. And our hypothesis is that through having a great body of knowledge and training, that we can train up many more true startup experts than can be created through lived experience. It's the same as seeing a doctor, right? Like, you don't expect someone to have broken their arm to be able to treat your broken arm. Like, why do we expect true startup expertise to be in people who've built 5 or more startups? And so that's one way we do it. So every time a person has a mentoring session, it's with a trained startup building expert. So that's one element. So there's the kind of the mentoring, and really what that's about is helping to set goals to help founders get to product market fit, and then breaking those down into steps. And so some of it is around helping founders achieve goals, but a lot of it is working out, right, what's the biggest problems that you have right now? What's blocking you? What's stopping you? And then kind of overcoming that, and then working out what the next thing is. And so it's kind of very much a question of kind of like diagnosing where a founder's at, kind of prescribing a plan to help them unblock themselves and make progress. And then we course correct. And that's, I think, why founders have been with us for so long, is that element of course correction. It's frequent and it's regular. And whoever they work with in LeapSheep, like, we're all trained on the same body of knowledge. And so they're going to get consistent advice.
So what kind of access do they have to y'all? Like, can I email you 24/7 hours a day? It's like certain times of the week they can call you. How's that work? Yeah,
so we have kind of core contact time. And again, this is different now to what it's going to be. So they're each founder based on their subscription level. They start with 1 hour and a half mentoring session a month. And then we also do education and coaching. So that user research topic, like I did a session last night with, I think, 10 founders, and that taught them how to do user research, like how to set it up, how to do the interviews, how to analyze it. And so then founders will get a session like that for a topic that's the most important thing that they need. And then outside of that, if they have things that they want, like if they want their pitch deck reviewed, if we do introductions, like warm introductions, and so they can just contact us at any time. Typically, unless it's extremely urgent, we'll respond within a reasonable time limit. If it's urgent, then we'll jump on a call to help a founder.
So from LeapSheep's point of view, what's success for y'all? Is success like 90% of your founders raise $1 million? Is it like 10% realize this isn't for them? Like, what's success?
Yeah. So our vision is to transform startup success rates. Because at the moment, they're kind of, if you look at the data, they're anywhere between 95 to 99% failure rates. And, we want to transform that so that if you're a founder, you can have a reasonable chance of success. Are we going to get those failure rates down to 0? No. But success for us is how much can we move the needle to help many, many more founders be successful? Because even if it's half, like that's, founder anguish halved, because it is hard. It's brutal to start a startup. For us, I mean, we do measure our success metrics, our capital raise for our founders, because that's a metric that is captured elsewhere. And then also founder survival rate. So we capture our, have founders been in business 5 years after they've formed, just because that's another metric that helps us to prove whether we have helped them to be successful. So those are our 2 core metrics that we track.
So let's say in 5 years, the failure rate goes like down to 20%. How do y'all prove that was you though? Like, how do you prove that was your doing?
Yeah, so we've, it's a great question. And the honest answer is that we'll never be able to truly prove that it's us. Sometimes you have amazing founders and they're going to be successful with or without LeapSheep. So the question of attribution is one that I don't think we've answered yet. All we know and all we can do is track the founders that are in our portfolio and their rates compared to the median outside of LeapSheep.
And your founders, you said all over the world right now?
Yeah, so we've got, the 2 kind of founding individuals is Kirk Drage, who's our CEO, and then Catherine Heaton, who's our COO. So they are both based in Adelaide. I'm a co-founder. I'm here in Seattle. And then our product manager, our head of product, Terry Saw, she's in Brisbane, so also in Australia.
And did you all come to the team at the same time or like different times?
So I joined a year after LeapSheep formed, and Terry joined a year after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of your responsibilities as a co-founder?
Yeah, so I've got a number of roles, just like anyone in a startup. So my core, so I'm a startup building advisor, in the way I've just described. I also do a lot of our education workshops. So I deliver probably 25 different topics. I also do a lot of the design and development of our education content. I do our pitch deck development. And we also do pitch assessments. So kind of providing a diagnostic that supports founders know if they're ready to raise capital. I head up our support function. And I am also head of customer success. So yeah, a lot of roles.
And you sweep the floor, take the trash.
Yeah, I mean, I do.
Accounting.
Anytime we start a new kind of package of work, I'll typically, I'm one of those people that I was always volunteering, and I continue to do that now. And I love kind of helping get solution concepts off the road. I also do, I kind of head up our research function as well. So all our user research, all our market research, I kind of head up that capability. But then I have got people who I can kind of, who are working for me. So I'm not doing all of that myself. Like we've got kind of junior team members that are doing a lot of that.
Well, the pitch deck itself, is just the pitch deck itself, or do you actually like critique them on the actual pitch?
So the assessment is both the content and also the storytelling. And the storytelling in the pitch is such a tricky one because when you first introduce yourself, you have to establish your trust and credibility. And then you have to kind of make sure that you are really getting people bought into the problem that you're solving and getting, like kind of Hollywood storytelling principles apply here. And then you've got to talk about your traction. And when you talk about your traction, you have to make out you have to be honest about what you validated and what you don't. And so there's that element of vulnerability that comes in there. Yeah. And then, when you have the ask, you've also got to be careful about how you make the ask and what you're saying. And so there's so many nuances in that. And we've developed our pitch deck model to help founders to work out both the business model side and then also the storytelling side.
I just thought analogy is like when you're pitching, like it's almost like you have like a McDonald's hamburger, right? But you got to sell it like it's a ribeye steak,
Yeah.
Yeah. And this one looks all right now. Yeah. But this was the business gonna be over here.
But interestingly though, and again, that's because you've got your vision, which is maybe 20 years into the future, what's the impact you want to have? One of the things that again is counterintuitive is if you can be really honest with investors about some of the challenges that you have found, Because if you think about from an investor point of view, if a founder tells me that everything's amazing and everything's great, well, where do I add value? Yeah. Whereas actually, one of the things that we have had to work really hard at is our marketing. Like none of us have had a ton of experience in marketing. And one thing that we have not focused on enough until probably this year is our marketing. And so actually being honest about that in a pitch to an investor, like it invites an investor to want to contribute or to help or to offer an opinion. And so having that two-way engagement is actually more effective at building relationships and trust with an investor than somebody who's going, oh, well, everything's amazing. We're going to hit 200% year, like month-on-month growth by September. Like, I actually think most investors want founders to be more honest and upfront about where they have challenges.
Is such a thing as being too honest? I mean, this might be a bad example. Yes. Suppose a founder goes to a VC. Hey, I'm depressed right now. I'm having mental health issues. Is that being too honest? Or you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you have these kind of challenges, and again, not to mock it, because founder mental health is a massive issue. Like I don't think there's a job as hard as being a founder of a startup. Like it's extremely draining. It's hard to keep motivated and persistent. And, we see a lot of that in our mentoring sessions. Like sometimes they are counseling sessions. And really that's the kind of thing that you might say to a therapist rather than an investor. Yeah, that's probably my advice there. This kind of thing, go to a therapist.
So what makes someone a horrible founder?
Ooh. So I've never met a horrible founder, but there are a few elements that make it challenging to work with some founders. So if somebody has a very big ego, or they're uncoachable, or they're so set on their opinion on something that they can't listen to another, it's hard to work with founders who are like that. We always say that we don't work with any. That's our one thing, is that we only work with founders who have a growth mindset. And that's one where you're kind of keen to learn, kind of open-minded to new ideas and new approaches, and not completely set that your way is the only way of doing it. That would be the one thing I would say. If you come across a founder who is hell-bent on their way and can't listen to feedback, it's almost impossible to work with them.
How quickly can you all figure that out? Does it take a couple of days, a month?
In the first meeting.
Usually.
Yeah.
They usually you just tell.
So we always meet a founder before we start working with them. And sometimes we will say, we're not the right fit for you. Like, good luck. And there might be, sometimes we make referrals to other things that might be kind of more appropriate for them. But typically, we would, it's just not a good fit. Our model doesn't work if you're uncoachable.
So do people have to apply for your program, or is it as long as they pay the money or pay the whatever it is?
We work with any founder that subscribes.
Okay.
Even if they're not a great fit. And that's, I think, one attraction of LeapSheep. You don't have to jump through any hoops. There's no cohort start date, no end date. You literally subscribe, and as long as you get value, you can keep subscribing. We also have subscription levels. So if you want to go faster or get more help faster, you can go up a level. And if actually there's so much going on that you need to go down a level, you can at any stage.
We talked earlier about building in public, but what about those CEOs, they're not comfortable speaking in public, they're kind of introverted and they're not really good storytellers. How do y'all help them overcome that?
So there is an extent to which you can help people to build those skills. If people don't have them though, then the best way around it is to find a co-founder that has those skills. That's, I think, the best approach is if a founder wants to try and is open-minded and keen to practice and take it on and get feedback, great. If not, co-founder.
What's a one characteristic y'all look for in a startup or co-founders?
Co-founders or founders? Founders, just coachability.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other thing is, the model that we have is very much customized to an individual founder's needs, but it's based on a system that we've kind of tried and tested and practiced. If we find that founders kind of come to the sessions, they come to the mentoring session, they come to the education, but they don't put it in practice, they're not going to make the progress that they want. It's like, if you kind of turn up to and meet a dietitian about what you should eat, and then you just keep eating burgers, like you're not going to lose weight. And the same is true with us and the founders we work with. And sometimes one of the things I think is a big aha for people that we work with is once they start putting the work in and like focusing on the things that we work on in the session, that's when they make the fastest progress. And so of course, that's when they go, oh, okay, actually, I'm really getting value here. I'm going to keep doing the work, keep doing the actions.
We talked earlier about like how long the journey actually is. How often do you have to tell founders like, it's not gonna be done in 2 months, right? Like a reality check.
All the time, all the time. I mean, I probably say that 10 times a week. There are no shortcuts. Well, that's not true. If you are very lucky and you have market pull, then you can shortcut some elements. So that's another thing actually about our pathways in our system, is that it's not like an education or you go to university and you learn entrepreneurship. With that, you have to do every single thing and every single topic. Like with us, if you have evidence of market pull and you've got it from multiple individuals, then great, like skip some steps. The only reason that we have our subscription is to help founders to go faster, reduce their risk, and spend their resources as effectively as possible. Most of the time, though, there's a lot of work to do at going back to that customer discovery, the user research, and then either updating or redoing the solution concept or just the way that you explain it. Because sometimes you find that there's a problem that's extremely interesting that your solution can actually solve. You just haven't thought about it that way. And so then there's just the marketing and the packaging and the customer experience around it that has to change. And that's the most interesting, I think, when founders go, oh my God, I've almost accidentally built the right thing. I'm just selling it wrong or marketing it wrong. And again, I love having these conversations with founders, just because I've never met a founder who was not fascinating and interesting. And so I feel pretty lucky and privileged that I get to spend all of my time helping founders.
Earlier we talked about like only less than 1% of founders actually raise money.
Yeah.
But even then, that's like, and probably half of those still fail, right?
More than
that still fail. So
yeah,
the money is not an indicator of being successful.
No, if you look at the data, I think out of VC investments, and again, this data is, I think, from 2014, I'm not going to try and remember the source, but there's data that says that 6 out of 10 investments that VC makes yield a negative return or no return. And so 4 out of 10 yield some sort of return. Typically 1 or 2% yield those kind of big unicorn, like 100x returns.
I'm probably making this up, but I think a stat that says like, actually, the more money founders raise, the more likely that they'll fail versus founders raise the right amount of money are more successful.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I'd say so, because if you have a ton of money in the bank, you don't have to be resourceful with how you spend it. You can waste it on all the wrong things. Whereas and this is why bootstrapping is such an effective tactic for startups, or can be an effective strategy, is because you have to extremely challenge yourself all the time about how you're spending money, what you're spending it on, have you spent it on the right things? And you're constantly reassessing and reevaluating. Whereas if you have millions in the bank, you're probably going to waste it. Like, I don't know if you know Rethink Robotics. They used to have kind of some of their robots in the museum, the technology museum that Paul Allen had shut down. But, they had, I think, over 700 million in capital, but they ended up having to shut down because they had designed their robots with the wrong type of servo motors. And so when they realized who their core customer segment was, it was manufacturing companies, but they'd spent all this money designing robots that couldn't precisely pick up different objects, and they ended up shutting down. And you just think, 700 million. Yeah.
Whoa, that's insane. So let's suppose that it's a pre-seed startup right there. They're trying to raise money. They had like little, no traction.
Mm-hmm.
How do they overcome
that? There are ways to find traction at any stage. So evidence, I don't want to keep going on about user research, but like evidence of the number of customers that you've spoken with, like records of the interviews that you've had where you've defined the problem, like evidence of the analysis that you've done, like, all of that is evidence of traction. That is where I would say, and for pre-seed, that's the way to get it. And being really focused on exactly who your niche customer is, getting that evidence, and then being able to explain it, and demonstrating, the trends, because a lot of pre-seed, well, how pre-seed is supposed to operate is that you're supposed to be able to find
Supposed being
investors.
the key word here.
Yeah, exactly. But you're supposed to be able to find investors that are so that they believe in you, and there's that founder investor fit, which is a really important part of all stages, but particularly pre-seed. Like if they believe the story that you have and you've got the evidence and the research, you put the time in, and you've put the time into that user research, like that is great evidence of traction. And it's going to mean that you start to build the right thing rather than falling down into the trap of build it and they will come.
How do y'all help your founders? Like, do y'all do introductions to VCs? How do you help them raise money?
Yeah. So the introductions to VCs, we do on a small scale, and it's something that we are continuing to build as we build out the software that kind of we've tested and done manually over the last 7 years. At the moment, we do make some introductions to VCs and to investors. And we also do the work to support founders to get their pitch decks and their storytelling and, their due diligence up to date. Like a lot of the education that we have for our subscribers, we have a topic on capital raising, a topic on your due diligence, and a topic on developing your pitch deck. And so that's the way that we help founders at the moment. Thinking ahead, our vision into the future is that, right now we are very much focused on the founder side, because if the founder side of our kind of two-sided platform doesn't work, then, we're validating and proving that we can add value to founders and create many more successful founders. And over time, we will then be looking into certifying founders as kind of LeapSheep founders. And our intention is that actually in the future, investors will, and again, this is a hypothesis, but that an investor would go, oh, they're a LeapSheep founder. Like we can see that they're running stand-ups, they're putting the effort into user research, they're kind of testing and iterating and doing that build, measure, learn. These are the founders that we want to invest in because we can see that they are following a risk-managed approach to building a startup.
Have y'all found that like founder mentality is different based on different locations, or is the founder regardless where they're at?
Great question. So founder mentality, I have very much founder build it and they will come mentality a lot in Seattle, but not with everybody. Like I met a few really amazing founders last week at Founders Bash, and who really were focused on understanding their customer before building. Typically, I find that, you've got, and again, I'm generalizing here massively, but often the younger the founder, they've got the energy and they will spend hours and hours and hours working, and they've got the persistence and the grit. But sometimes they're so keen to build. And again, this is a generalization, but sometimes they can be so keen to build that they try and skip steps and then they have to go back to them. Whereas when you have particularly founders who have worked in business before working in a startup, or perhaps they've worked in education or a company, typically they will have a more considered approach, and so they don't really want to go fast. They want to do things right. Those are a few generalizations. And I mean, there's so many different types of founders. We kind of our personas, we've got kind of builder founders that just want to build, and so you have to make sure that they've done enough, that they're building the right thing. And then you have kind of more cautious founders who want to make sure that they do as much as they can to get it right, whilst also still going fast.
So next is like a two-part question. Can you talk about the Seattle tech startup scene and networking in Seattle?
I actually really love networking in Seattle. There's so many events. I only managed to go to a handful of them because I'm usually working Australian hours. My favorite event of the year is Founders Bash, just because there's so many people that are at it. And I love the energy and enthusiasm that you find whenever you talk to anybody. And the investors in Seattle are also great. They're always keen to help, keen to make introductions, like all of those kind of things. I absolutely love the Seattle ecosystem. I think it sometimes gets a bad press. When you compare it to Silicon Valley or others, and it's a more conservative investor landscape, I think, in Seattle. But there's so much good stuff to it. I've been going to the Seattle, there's like a Seattle female funder poker nights, which I have really enjoyed over the last year. And it's a great way to make connections and also encourage particularly women to be more risk taking. Typically women do tend to be less risk takers. And so that's, there's so many things going on in Seattle. It's a little hard to keep track of it. I think I've heard you say the same. Yeah.
So here's one. So in Seattle, I think in Seattle you could probably do 2 events a day if you wanted to, right? So how does of course you got to get out in the public, build network, but how do you balance doing that but still building your product, right?
Yeah. The often you find at events is founders that are still searching for kind of what their solution is, what their product is. Typically, once founders have got VC money, they're typically working so damn hard that they don't tend to go to so many events. I'd say it is a balance. Each time you go to an event, you want to think like, what am I getting out of this? So for example, like I go to Founders Live every month because it's a great place to meet founders and to talk to founders and to have fun with other founders. And that's why I go there. Like I love going to Founders Live for that reason. I think it's think what you want. Is it peer support? Is it connections? Like if you go, there's a lot of events out there run typically by VCs or law firms about like, how to attract and raise funding and all that kind of stuff. And again, if you have a problem there and that's the kind of thing that can help, then it's a good event to go to. But I think if you're going to more than 1 or 2 events a week, you're probably going to too many events.
So how do y'all make money?
So we have a subscription. So we don't take equity. We just take subscription revenue, and then things like our pitch deck development, that's a service that we sell that's additional to the subscription.
And then how do y'all figure out your pricing model? Was it like trial and error or just you threw some darts at the wall?
Yeah. So we ran a series of experiments when we first started, before we'd built out the kind of all the body of knowledge that sits underneath everything. We like our first MVP was our CEO Kirk with a whiteboard and a pen in Adelaide. And we charged, I think our starting price was 300 Australian dollars. That's about 200 US a month. For a mentoring session and an education session. And the education session was Kirk and the whiteboard and his knowledge that he's built up over decades. And so then from that, we then experimented with, could we have subscribers subscribing for a minimum of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? And then we did raise our prices as we've brought on more team. And at the moment, our prices, I think that they start at 650 a month for our kind of lowest level. But again, the prices that we have now, as we build out software to make what we have self-service, like our intention is that we'll be able to massively reduce the price for a completely self-service kind of AI advisor offering. And that will mean that we can democratize access to what we have that's currently behind a paywall. So that if you're anyone in the world with an idea, you can use our SaaS solution to help you to validate and test it and go through all the kind of steps that I've talked to you about.
Yeah. So when you bring on a startup, is it for like is that only for the founder, everyone in the team, like who gets access?
Yeah, so it very much depends on what the founder wants. Sometimes particularly if they don't have a co-founder, but they have a team, typically we start with just the founder so that they can kind of get everything off their chest, kind of like discuss things that are all about the strategy of the business. And then they potentially bring their team members on. And it's very much as the founder chooses. Having said that, with Richard Kwan, who I mentioned in Kiratech, we have his whole leadership team. They come so that we can kind of test out ideas and help them with things as a team. And again, it just depends what the founder wants. Over time, I think we'll build that into our pricing, but at the moment it's the same price, whether it's one founder or the whole team.
Okay. And then have y'all found a difference? Does it really matter if it's one founder, 2 co-founders, 3 or more co-founders? Does that really make a difference?
So the evidence tends to suggest that if you have co-founders, you're more likely to be successful. For us, it's sometimes the role that we take on in the mentoring is that of a co-founder. It's the challenge, the kind of the questioning and the evidence to support that challenge. And so and again, sometimes we've found that managing the tension between co-founders can be a real challenge, particularly if you have one full-time co-founder and one that's perhaps working another job.
Jobs actually like blow up because of that, right?
Yeah. And sometimes we've helped founders to manage kind of dissolving the co-founder situation. And of course, with equity and equity agreements, it can be very tricky and complicated. But sometimes the best solution is for one co-founder to leave the business.
Ever been a thing where like you had a cattle founder, like I appreciate hustle and grind, but you can't work 22 hours a day for the rest of your life. Like you need to get some sleep. Like you need to do something else.
I have had that conversation a few times with founders. Yeah, because you're going to burn out. You might be able to do that for 6 months or a year, and maybe if you're in your 20s, maybe 2 years, 3 years. But uh, you're gonna, if you're not getting sleep, if you're not exercising, if you're not taking a break, then you are going to burn out, and you won't, and that will hurt your chances of being successful. I know everyone says like before you start a capital raise, you want to make sure you've got your sleep good, your diet, your exercise built in, because otherwise you just can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's very true.
And how many customers y'all have right now?
Yeah, we've got around 50 customers right now, 50 subscribers. And we're about to take on a ton more. We also power the accelerator program for a couple of universities. And so we're about to take on a cohort there. But our own paying subscribers, we've got about 50.
And what's the max y'all can take care of, so to speak?
I mean, if we were to get an extra 300 subscribers tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to manage it. But because our numbers kind of are growing gradually, then as we need more resource, we can take it on. And we've just brought on another startup building advisor in the last couple of weeks.
Is there a city you're not in that y'all want to be in?
The answer to that is no, just because like unlike accelerator programs or kind of investors, we don't really have a city. We really will work with any founder anywhere.
Okay. So here's one for you. So like,
Yeah.
I know here in the States, like a lot of tech startups are like, San Francisco, Seattle, Austin, Boston. That's the VC money is. But like suppose there's a founder saying like, Fayetteville, Arkansas, right? Like how do you like, what am I looking for? Like, how do you make sure they get access to everything they need, right?
Yeah. It's becoming so much easier, particularly since the pandemic. As long as people have Wi-Fi and an internet connection, like, whether you're in a rural area or in a city. I mean, obviously, if you're somewhere like Silicon Valley, in many ways, and you are able to get connections, you're probably going to be successful because the ecosystem is very mature. But our whole model is predicated on the fact that you can found a business from anywhere. Like it's accessible, it's easy to do. I guess it would be a challenge if you were building a solution for farmers and you lived in a city and you could never actually talk to farmers face to face, because farmers are the kind of people that actually you need to get out there and talk to them. Like if you're not willing to do that, then you're probably building the wrong type of business. But in that case, it's like, well, maybe we can help you with a different customer segment and a different product idea. Occasionally we've suggested and recommended to founders that they close their businesses down, but on the whole, we've been able to help founders to pivot until they will find the right customer, the right segment, the right investor.
And do you all help with with hiring people?
Yeah, we do that as well as we do that through the subscription. Typically things like, this is a great question as well, is who do you hire and when? And often we'll be helping founders with the right hires. People are quick to hire a software developer, but often actually the skills that they need initially are like people who can talk to customers and do research and concepts.
Does this person know your tech stack, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so
Do you even know your tech stack?
Well, I know quite. And do you know what tech stack you need right now versus what tech stack you'll move into in the future? I mentioned earlier on our pathway model, but there's kind of 4 pathways. And the one that most people are broadly familiar with, thanks to Steve Blank and the Startup Owners Manual, is the innovate pathway to get to product market fit. But there's also like, who do you need on your team and who do you need at the right time on your team? There's, how are you operating your business model? Like if you're paying money on paid ads and you don't have any customers, like how do you know what you should be, what the ads are going to say? Because you haven't been able to get a paying customer yet. It's too early for paid ads. You want to be spending time with people, understanding how they talk about their problem. And then the last one is the capital pathway. Like how do you extend your runway in the best way that's appropriate for you? And we typically find that we work with individual founders to work out where they are in each journey, each of those 4 pathways, and then help them to make progress along each of the 4, not just build the product. Because if you, there's some great data actually on inconsistent scaling. Like so many founders are focused on the product. And then of course it's like, oh shit, actually I need to build a team. Like, I don't have any processes and systems. And one of the things we do at LeapSheep is help you to build the right things at the right time.
Yeah, it's like so many founders, like on one hand, they're like product, no marketing. And the reverse is marketing, and no product, right?
Yeah.
I think it's hard. I could get a link, the balance. It's hard to do.
it's hard. It's a balancing act. And I mean, we are working hard to try and build a playbook for that and to make it accessible. But it is a hard journey. Like we spent just over 7 years on it now, and we're still going. There's so much to do. And sometimes we come across people in the ecosystem and they're like, oh, I thought of that idea and then it was too hard. And so I stopped. And it has been a hard and a long journey. Yeah. But, yeah.
How do you do your schedule every day? How do you figure out what to do day to day?
Yeah. So I mentioned that agile and sprint planning. So every sprint, at the end of each sprint, we plan what we're going to do for the next sprint. So we have kind of our vision, which is transform startup success rates. And then underneath that, we have core goals based around our finances, our customer experience, and our employee experience. And then from those goals and metrics, then we look at the capacity we have on the team. And then we plan out what everybody is going to be working on for the next sprint. And obviously, you can course correct if something urgent comes in. And then at the end of the sprint, we look at what everyone managed to achieve. And through that showcase, we see what was released. And then we replan for the next sprint. And sometimes in the middle of a sprint, we have to replan urgently. Like if a tender comes in and we have to urgently put that together, then other things will have to get deprioritized. But we use Agile to help us to do our sprint planning.
And you have someone on your team that is almost like a tech advisor to the startups?
So we have our CTO, Hayden. And so any of the training or coaching or kind of tech related things, he runs those mentoring or education sessions. And then our CEO, Kurt, he's our technical co-founder, so he does the same.
Okay, so change the subjects. Let's go back to snorkeling.
Yes.
When's the last time you've been snorkeling?
Too long ago. It was, I think, last summer. I went to Australia, partly for work, partly to visit family over there. And then on the way back, our flight went through Fiji. And so we went snorkeling off of Fiji, and it was fabulous. Apart from I got bit by a jellyfish. And I had to hide it from my husband because he had told me not to go in the water because of the jellyfish. And I went in anyway. So I bravely went out and carried on despite a quite painful jellyfish sting.
And how long have you been doing this? How long have you been snorkeling?
Oh God, as long as I can remember. I was maybe, I think 15, 16 when I first snorkeled. I mean, maybe I was an adult. I mean, there's not a ton of places to snorkel off of the coast of England unless you're prepared to dive down to like the depth.
I thought you were about to say unless you're prepared to die for snorkeling.
I mean, England is a very safe. There's not much that's going to kill you in England. It's not like, I remember when I first went for a hike over here and I went to Snow Lake, and that I thought in England there's always a cut through. And so I thought I'd found a great cut through. And then I got lost and ended up like kind of getting extremely dehydrated and lost in the wilderness. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm going to be one of those idiots that are in the paper.
Be on the news.
Yeah, like stupid English tourist tries to make cut through, ends up getting eaten by bear. Yeah, but yeah.
So have you ever done a scuba diving?
I have. I went to the Great Barrier Reef about 20 years ago and I scuba dived there, but I struggle with my ears. Like, sometimes people's ears just pop.
Yeah.
And I found it tricky. How about you? Have you ever done?
No, I haven't. No. Yeah. Is there any like something you want to do, like skydiving or running a marathon that's on your bucket list?
Ooh, just see the Northern Lights. That's my bucket list item, and I'm determined to do it. I hope this year. I've been searching them for ages, and one of my friends, Helen, she's convinced that she saw the Northern Lights from a cache point in, like, I think Manchester in the UK in the middle of the night. I'm like, there is no way you saw the Northern Lights. There's just no way. But that's my common dream, is to see the Northern Lights.
And you're going to record it and all that kind of stuff.
But that's the one thing I need to work out, is I've only got an iPhone, not a proper camera. Okay. So I need to work out what settings I need to do to see them properly.
Yeah.
Really going to catch me out.
And I guess you're flying up there, right?
Yeah. I'm hoping to see them on the flight on the way over. Otherwise I'm going to be not sleeping just in the hopes that they might come out.
Up there 24/7, just like coffee, what you got to do to stay awake.
Yes. But there's so many apps out there now, and like Facebook groups that tell you when they're out. So I'm hopeful that that's going to help me. I mean, I feel like technology is the solution here. I went to Finland for a week about 10 years ago, and I think the Northern Lights came out 4 times when I was there. But each time it was like 4 a.m., like 1 a.m., and I had no idea. So
what am I doing sleeping?
Yeah, I mean, it was so cold that the hairs in my nose froze. So I wasn't just going to stay out all the time. Yeah.
So are you interested like that like space stuff and stuff like that, or?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, if there was one specialism that we have at LeapSheep, it's space startups. Just because we've run 4 accelerator programs for space startups. And I love seeing what is happening in the space sector.
Yeah.
And I think the most exciting thing for me is actually technologies that are built to work in space and actually seeing them be implemented in the ground. Yeah. It's fabulous. Like things like, being able to spot and detect wildfires instantly and put them out before they become an issue, or, spotting like kind of like pirate ships that are, a danger. Like there's so much that space technology can do on land. It's fascinating. One of the most exciting companies that we've had subscribe with us recently is a company called Paladin Space. And they've designed a solution that basically eats and recycles space debris. And no one else out there is doing it. Like the only companies that are doing it are focused on big debris, but actually most of the debris is very small. And you just think that's actually a massive problem, like space junk. And I'm pretty excited to see where he goes.
Satellites in space now, just cluttering up outer space.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really imagine what it looks. I mean, I've seen the pictures that he has of space, but you just think, God, it's. I mean, again, it's like the Wild West. Like no one's been regulating it, but regulation is and will come. And then, of course, there's going to be all these solutions that are needed. And if you look at SpaceX, like I love what SpaceX has done for the space industry, because who knew that you could make reusable space rockets?
Yeah, I remember the first time they re-land, like, oh shit, like this is dope right here. This is like pretty badass right here.
Yeah.
This is like some Star Trek, Star Wars, space fantasy stuff right here.
Yeah, and at 1/10 of the cost.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm continually fascinated by SpaceX, and the advancements that they have made, and similarly, like Tesla, with kind of driving and forcing the car industry to move to electric vehicles.
Everyone's going electric.
It wasn't going to do it without Tesla.
No.
Yeah, and I love that about startups. It's like that power to disrupt and then prompt big improvements and changes.
And like I think James Webb telescopes is discovering like 1,000 galaxies a day with 1,000 planets in there. Like,
yeah.
And I think they discovered like the universe has like a background hum or something, like a background music, whatever. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm continuously curious and fascinated by all the new potential ideas. And I think, as AI starts to potentially displace people from jobs, there's only going to be more startups and more ideas that people actually then get around to pursuing. And I can't wait to see what comes. I think, the last decade has very much been full of like consumer apps. And I mean, there's been some great developments in other industries, but I wonder if the next decade is going to be more full of like really big problems being solved, like, carbon. Yeah.
Like, do we really need another last mile app? Do we need another like delivery app? Like, is tech really solving your problems?
Yeah. But I think harnessing the power of tech to solve those big problems, like, I think VC money is starting to move in that direction. And of course, if you look at like solar, wind, like that's now economically cheaper than oil and gas and coal. And you just think, well, where things make money, that's where the money follows. It's just making sure that the big problems get the funding in order to kind of kickstart them in the way that solar and wind power were kickstarted kind of decades ago.
So you going to Mars?
Never say never. I definitely would rather go into space than go under the water. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'd be interested to see what happens because I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I thought flying cars were going to be here by now.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, I'm like, where are my flying cars? And I mean, I think they're due for. I read something a few months ago that I think was saying that LA is going to get flying cars next year. I'm like,
I mean, it was frustrating. Like, I think JFK said we're going to be in the moon in 60. We got there like 9 years later. And you think, well, what have we really done since 1969, right? I mean, the space shuttle. I mean, the space shuttle is actually a step backwards, right? Because you go to the moon, it's like you got to do the moon. Space shuttle is a different type of rocket, right? And just flying around the planet, right? But it's like, what have we done these last 50 years? You would think it would have been like, I don't say colonize Mars, or we should have done something, I think,
Well, yeah, but then I think after, the space race was just driven really by the Cold War and America and Russia trying to compete with each other. But then it fascinates me because you have all these men like, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, who were children and watched the space race. and then they come in, make their money elsewhere, and then they're the ones that are driving space innovation. And yeah, I mean, because I don't think the government could have continued to fund space exploration in a way that private companies can now.
Yeah, I just remember this. I don't know if you're not remember watching a news show where like I think it was the Apollo 11 or Apollo 13 that like were acting in space. They they didn't die; they could have died. And then after that, President Nixon like shut it down because they don't want to risk any more Americans in space. That kind of shut it down a little bit. I don't know how true that is.
Do you know what? And I do think technology is held to a very, very high standard. It's like if one person dies in a self-driving car accident, then like, it's like, wow, like stop self-driving cars. But you think how many,
even if that person is fault.
Yeah. And and you think how many thousands and thousands of people are killed in traffic accidents all year round by people driving. Like tech is held to a high standard.
Yeah.
And I think rightly so. Yeah, it's fascinating. And, I think that's right. Like, an American dies, like something must be done.
Remember this? I can't remember when it happened. There was like they had a video of this guy. He was in a Tesla driving, but he's like passed out asleep.
Yeah.
And like cars just going everywhere. Like,
yeah. Well, one thing that I'm not unsure about if this would happen, but like, you have like the case from this week about the Vegas hotels getting hacked. Like, surely the one thing that does concern me a little about technology is you always need to have a manual override because there is always the potential for a bad actor to hack.
You watched that one movie, what's it called? Fast and Furious, where they hacked all the vehicles and like all the cars driving everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. That is one thing that if I have a recurring fear is that, which is a bit of a strange fear to have, but self-driving cars just going crazy and taking over and crashing into everything.
I know. Can you imagine getting your Tesla and the Tesla says, "Get out. I'm not driving you today."
No, or you get in and the Tesla drives you into a wall. Like, yeah, it's it's an interesting one, but I don't know. I think there's always going to be the tension because as people get into power, they tend to want to keep hold of power and stay in power. And then of course you've got tech. And then I hadn't realized until I think the last couple of weeks that Elon Musk actually stopped a Ukraine offensive by turning off Starlink.
Yeah.
And you just think there's a lot of power that sits with a couple, like a very small number of individuals, whether that's politicians or tech owners. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with that in the future.
Yeah, I heard about that. Then again, like he did a lot of stuff for them too in the beginning of the war, so like
yeah. Oh no, I know. And to be honest, I don't know enough about the situation to make any sort of negative comment. Because I think with Starlink, he's given Ukraine like amazing internet access.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to me that like
they decided to turn off at this exact moment.
Oh yeah. I think it was from again the article I read was saying that he was worried about what that would do with kind of escalating the war. It's a complex
so
situation.
basically, got a private businessman making like geopolitical decisions.
Yeah.
So what are we living today?
It's a crazy world.
Yeah. So back to space.
Yes.
So with all these millions of planets out there, we're going to go deep dive now. Do you think there's other life out there?
I do.
Now, when I say life, do you mean like a little microbe bacteria, or do you mean like actual intelligent life?
Definitely bacteria and other things like that. Definitely. Part of me enjoys the fact that I don't know.
Yeah.
To me, it's just a fascinating topic, and I love the fact that humans don't really know. Like, I think there is evidence of life in other planets because, there's been kind of releases of information and podcasts and things about it. But I love not knowing.
And supposedly there's like proof of water millions of years ago on Mars, because the way the planet is, something like that, But I mean, like who knows, right? Like, do you really know? No, you don't.
No, and I do question whether anyone's actually going to be able to live on Mars. Like, to me, that I don't actually think I believe that, but I'm also happy to be proved wrong. One of the things that I've learned over and over as I've got older is that like have a strong opinion, but have it loosely held.
Yeah.
Because you never know when you're going to be wrong or when someone's got a better opinion or a stronger opinion than you. And you go, oh, okay, that's an interesting perspective I hadn't thought of. And I feel that way about outer space.
I know a lot of people will say, aliens out there, I want them to come visit me. I'm like, I don't know if I want aliens to come visit us, right? Like, I don't know about that one, right? Like, if they're alive, stay inside of the universe, right? Like, they're probably more technically advanced than us. They don't know what their intentions are. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I sometimes I like having something that's unknown. Because I think, you know, if aliens were to come to the planet, I mean, really, who knows? Like, who knows what would happen? It would just be complete. Yeah, I think it would be complete chaos. And I'm. There are some things I'm quite happy not knowing about, and some things I'm curious about. And
Yeah.
I'd put kind of interplanetary life in the things I'm okay not knowing about just yet.
Yeah, like the aliens are coming like tomorrow and then wipe us out. I really don't want to know, right?
Would you want to know? I don't think I would.
No.
I think I'd rather it just happen.
Like they're gonna come and wipe us out in a second. There's nothing we can do about it. Like,
Yeah.
why no, right? Now if we have a fighting chance, yeah, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But they're gonna come like, okay, that's like wipe us off like ants.
I know, and I don't have any combat experience. Like I think I'd be quite useless in a situation fighting with an alien. I mean, you might be better equipped.
Yeah, basically, go to talk about stuff like this, like generalized. I won't say use the word fantasize, you know, but and it's crazy. Like some people like actually like conspiracy theories, like they 100% believe the aliens are coming, the aliens are here. Like the people I don't believe like aliens are here right now, right? Running the government, you know, all kind of craziness.
Yeah, I mean, fake news that kind of drives those kind of conspiracy theories. I think it's only getting more dangerous and more hard to spot.
It is.
I like to think that I keep an open mind. Having said that, I'm extremely gullible on certain topics, but I've never been one to go down a conspiracy theory route.
Yeah. And then like you have like the flat earthers out there. It's like to me, okay, you say the Earth's flat. Look at all the planets; they're round.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we be the same as them?
I mean, I don't really understand how anyone can think that the Earth is flat. The only way that I think you would think that is if you hadn't ever been anywhere, you hadn't had education, you couldn't get access to images. Like, I just think there's so much evidence that it's round.
Yeah.
That if you haven't seen that evidence, we don't believe it. I don't know. Yeah, it seems irrational to me, but then I like to put myself in another person's shoes and understand why they think that way.
Yeah, I guess maybe if you like grew up in Kansas all your life where everything's flat, but even then it's curvature you still, you know.
Do you know what? Kansas is on my list of places that I would like to see in the US.
Is it?
I don't know why, but I would like to go.
So Kansas City is a really nice place.
Is it?
It's a really good city. Yeah. Kansas City is nice. Yeah.
I think that's on our places, like cities we'd like to visit next year.
That's a good place.
Any places that you'd add?
Oh man, San Antonio.
Yep.
Austin. Those are good places. Charleston, South Carolina.
Where?
Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah. I really want to go to Charleston.
That's a really good place.
Yeah.
And Savannah, Georgia.
Yes, I've also not been there.
Those places, yeah.
Yeah, all good places. How about you? Where's next on your list that you'd like to go?
Oh man, I'm not sure. To be honest with you, something random. Maybe Wyoming or like North Dakota, like something totally random. You know. Oh, I want to go to like maybe Maine or Vermont during the fall. See all the leaves.
Yeah, that would be a good trip. Yeah, I would also like to do that. I think. Yeah, I also would like to go and see the larches because I think in Eastern Washington you can see larches are coming up soon. I would like to see them. That'd be pretty cool.
Also, I want to live in like New York City for like 6 months.
That would be amazing.
But my wife probably has something to say about that. But
yeah, do you know what? I do. In some ways, I wish that the digital nomad lifestyle had been possible when I was unencumbered by children. Because I think I would have really enjoyed it. But at the time, there was no way I was working anywhere but an office.
Yeah, different times.
Yeah, different times.
So back to LeapSheep.
Yes.
So you already talked about it some, but can you go more detail how it got started, what your focus on, and what the vision is for it?
Yeah, sure. So back in, I think it would have been 2015. So the reason I started working at LeapSheep is I was just about to move to America. So I was kind of packing, and then Catherine, who's our COO, her and I had known each other personally for a number of years. And she came from Australia and she was in France, in Paris for a conference. And she said, why don't you just come over and chat to me? I'm like, okay, I'm happy to come over, visit. And I did. And it was just as her and Kirk were starting up LeapSheep. And at the time they were doing consulting to startups in Southeast Asia. And so they were flying from Australia to Southeast Asia to basically help startup founders to build their businesses. And then I think they both thought, hang on a minute, like this seems to be a problem that there is in Adelaide as well. Like, why don't we see if we can build a product to make it easy for any founder anywhere to build a successful startup? And I'd never heard of startups. I went to Paris with Catherine and we spent the entire weekend talking about startups. And I was just about to leave my job at the CQC in the UK. And we spent the whole time talking about LeapSheep. And so then I moved to America. I had my second daughter, and Catherine and I kept in touch. And I said, look, the American, how the situation is for working women in the US is very unlike England. Like in England, you can work part-time, you can have children, and it's easy. Like everyone I know in England works, they're working parents. Whereas in the US, you're either working 5 days a week or you're not working. It was very strange to me. And so I was like, well, how do I avoid that? I know I'll work for an Australian company. And of course I had LeapSheep in my mind because I really, really was compelled by the problem that they were solving, even though I had no startup experience. And then I started working for them. I initially did work in doing research, and I did history as my undergraduate degree. And so then I started working for LeapSheep in that way. And then gradually, as I proved kind of what I could do and my skills, then I started to research a lot of the content and kind of put it together and work with the rest of the team to put these models together. And then over time, I gradually built up more experience, worked with more startups in smaller ways, like just about research. And then of course, I kind of built out my expertise and training. And now that's how I do so many things now. And it's because I've worked with really hundreds of founders and their teams. And that's kind of that's where I am now. And I couldn't really imagine working at anywhere else, to be honest.
So what's the future vision for LeapSheep? What's the plan to be?
Yeah. So at the moment we're in our human-centric delivery stage, but we very much see ourselves as a product company. It's just that we have been designing and testing and validating our model as by doing manual delivery with humans delivering the product. And at the moment we're codifying and building what we have into software. And then the next stage will be is actually capturing, and again, we already capture founder data. So things like, when, how many times has a founder pivoted, like who's on their team, are they doing stand-ups, like all of that data we capture. And it's very founder-centric data that helps founders to kind of progress their business. Like, how many times have they updated their goals and metrics and things like that. And so all of that data, and we'll be able to collect a lot more of that in a more efficient way with our software as we're building it. And then, and that will be building the data sets on which we'll train AI so that we can have an AI, very much AI-centric system, so that really and of course, the more founders we work with, the smarter we get, the better evidence that we have about the advice and the guidance that we're giving. And so that's our flywheel. Like the more founders become successful, they'll tell more people about LeapSheep, then people will actively seek out LeapSheep like they do Y Combinator right now. And of course, then the smarter we get, the smarter our system gets. With the intention being that kind of in probably 5 to 6 years from now, we will have, I think there'll still be some element of human delivery for parts of our offering. But actually, if you're a founder and you're in the middle of Uzbekistan or Nigeria, and you have an idea, then actually you'll be able to log on to our Startup Builder platform and do all of that work and test out your idea and get kind of validation and feedback and get introductions to, your potential customers, because we'll have been able to build all of that whole product out. And so it's really designed just to help founders be more successful at solving big world problems.
So who else is doing this? Who's your competitor?
Yeah, so there are, it's a crowded market in many ways. You've got accelerator programs, incubators, universities, professional services firms. There's a lot of people running particularly programs. And of course, the very best of these, Y Combinator, and particularly Y Combinator kind of 10 years ago as well, when there was small cohorts and you had the small network. If you get into Y Combinator, or if you get to have Steve Blank, at Stanford University, then your chances, these are true experts working there. And so your chances of being successful are way higher. But there's also a lot of noise and what we would call innovation theatre, in that, there's a lot of events and programs and things that are actually not actually moving the needle on startup success rates. Similarly, there's also matching platforms. So, you've got Gust and multiple other platforms, and companies like Signal and FX, that are supposed to match investors with founders. But the problem with those is that, it's a bit like a dating app. You can match with somebody, but actually there's a whole due diligence step that isn't catered for by those kind of solutions. And then I'm starting to learn more and more about kind of new products that are designed to screen founders and screen founders
more from the investor side, these are just starting to come onto the market now. And again, I'm happy to be corrected or challenged on this, but many of these kind of solutions, they aren't founder centric. Like we're all about trying to build many, many, many more successful founders. And again, there's the grit and resilience, like personality type of a founder, which is an element. But a lot of what we believe is that actually, if you give people the right education and guidance and coaching and help them to learn kind of the unknown unknowns in the right way, then you can help many, many, many more founders be successful. And that's, we've all been working really damn hard for a number of years because we believe so strongly in this.
So what's been some indicators to y'all that y'all actually are on the right path? Like this is the right thing to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, our lifetime value metric is probably our biggest indicator and our low churn rate, because if founders don't subscribe, if founders don't get value, they just stop subscribing. That's probably our best objective metric.
So what's it called? Churn rate? You have a pretty low churn rate.
Yeah, our churn rate is pretty low. And again, right now, the way that we manually deliver our service, it's not all singing, all dancing. Like it does the job, but we've got founders that are pulling this software from us so that they can get the value outside of contact time with us. And so we've got a pretty clear validation that we should be building what the software that we are building. And it's kind of reached a stage now where, yes, we can continue as in the way that we're doing it, but there's enough data and evidence. And often when I meet a founder and they've made a ton of mistakes, and often they'll say, oh, I wish I'd known about LeapSheep earlier. And that's hard to hear, but it also gives a lot of validation that we're onto something.
So when you do the AI model and get rid of the human touch, isn't it going to kind of lose some of the customer service y'all provide? Isn't it going to lose some of what LeapSheep is?
Well, I think we'll always have an element which has a human, like a trained startup expert. But similarly, if you could, so say Steve Blank, for example, like one of the most recognized startup experts, like if you could have access to Steve Blank as say like an AI advisor that was Steve Blank, I think many founders would want that. And then of course, the people that we have in the company will be able to get them kind of working on developing and improving the product. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I still see that there'll be human advisors for a long time to come. Okay. Just because, the level of maturity that you would need for an AI to be able to do what we do manually at the moment, I think it's years away. Again, I'm happy to be proved wrong, but the data doesn't exist.
So how do we fix this potential problem? Right, we talked about AI before. Like for example, they're talking about in the future, all the truck drivers going away, be AI trucks drivers. I'm making this number if that happens, 250,000 people out of a job instantly, right? And of course, that would probably crash the economy, right? Maybe what do you do with these people, right? Do you what's it called? Something basic income?
Yeah,
universal basic income. Do we do that? What do you think about all that?
Do you know what? I would not consider myself an expert on this particular topic, but all I can give you is my opinion. So, if you think about kind of the transition from coal, particularly coal mines, and, there's jobs in clean tech, they're different jobs, but actually, this whole concept of a job for life, people, I think, are going to have to get used to the fact that they're going to continually have to change and evolve and adapt to new ways of working. So yes, potentially there may be a number of jobs that go away either completely or reduce, but there will always be new types of work coming up. I'd never heard of a social media manager when I was at school because they didn't exist. And I do think that those kind of new jobs will always come up. And if you are willing to retrain and relearn,
better jobs.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, the gig economy model, there are, so I wouldn't necessarily say that an Uber driver or
that's true.
Those kind of gig economy jobs, there's a lot of issues with them. But I mean, I'm naturally an optimist. Sometimes I worry a lot about disruption to people in the workforce. But I worry for the people that are reluctant to change or unable to change. I think if you're willing to retrain and relearn, then the world could be your oyster. Having said that, the pain of losing a job
is
A lot of
is a
people that's
big
a lot of people
pain.
that's an identity. I'm a truck driver. I'm this. I'm that. Right, and then
Yeah,
taken
it's their
away.
identity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a perfect example, like way back in the day when everyone used to have ride horses and the cars came, people were like,
Yeah.
"Oh my goodness," all these people who were like, there was a job where people like the other show would like they take the horse shit off the
Yeah.
street,
Yeah.
they're gonna lose their job. Of course, they
Yeah.
did, right? But like something else came along.
Yeah. And I mean, there's going to be a big element, which is, and there's two kind of elements to it. It's one, which is training people how to use AI effectively to make them more effective in their jobs. And then there's the element of, for the people who are in a position where they lose their job, like, the horse poo movers. Then
Okay, like that's a good job title.
I was about to say shit shovelers, but I'm like,
horse poo mover.
Horse poo mover. Yeah. I mean, there is an element of like, how do you actively help people not to be fearful of the future? And I don't think there's not.
I mean, honest, if your job was like being a horse poo mover, like, high skilled warrior, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, that's the fascinating thing, I think, to me. And again, there's a whole bigger conversation about immigration and society. Because, like, England with Brexit and the US with its more restrictive immigration policies, there's a ton of jobs that people do not want.
Yeah.
Like, people don't want to have a job in a care home where they're potentially, like, working with people like constantly going to the toilet.
Yeah.
Like, people don't want those jobs. And there is an element of how can we harness technology to do the jobs that humans don't want to do.
Yeah. I remember seeing a video a while ago, maybe a week ago, where like this robot was cleaning the bathrooms, right? I mean, like that's a whole industry out, out the window, right? Cleaning.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't think they get paid well, for what they do, but I mean, like,
I wonder how, I'm not certain the cleaning industry is close to being disrupted. I can't quite imagine a robot cleaning a toilet or a sink, but I mean,
this one did. It cleaned it.
Really?
Yep.
Oh man, I'm gonna search for that.
Yeah, it cleaned the whole bathroom, toilet, bathtub, sink.
What?
Yeah, like all the hoses and gloves and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Oh man. Wow.
Yeah. So do you think this industry that AI is not going to disrupt?
No.
No.
Not in some way or other. I can't think of an industry that won't have some sort of, and again, some industries are going to be really disrupted and others are going to be improved or transformed. I can't think of one that will be untouched. Can you?
No, I don't.
No, I really don't.
Because they're painting pictures, they're doing music.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you think about plane flight is already like most pilots don't even fly planes anymore. Just push a couple buttons, just stuff for emergencies.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why I'm unsure about our hypothesis about humans as startup experts, because a human, same with a doctor, like a doctor and a human are only as good as their knowledge and their ability to operate a system. Yeah. I know the thing that I'm unsure about is the extent to which you'll be able to build empathy, like human level empathy into AI. But then, I mean, you can't build it in many humans. So
no, I think the challenge too is like who's coding AI? Is it a good person, a bad person? Like who's actually doing the code for this? Like, are they putting empathy in there, like diversity stuff, all those soft skills, or is this like the robot says, do this now,
Yeah, and I think also the ability to trace how an AI has built something or developed something is like how and who's going to be accountable.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Do we want AI deciding when to launch nuclear weapons,
Yeah.
Or deciding what weapon systems to do or whatever the case may be, or.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what would happen in the US if the average age of politicians went down. Because, there's a, do you know what, I'm about to go into a topic that I really shouldn't probably talk about, but, there's a lot of people who are kind of an age who are in Congress who actually they probably don't really use technology and they're not necessarily aware of some of the risks and benefits.
It was so embarrassing. Like when Mark Zuckerberg testified in front of Congress, how do you make money? Ads. Like, you don't know that?
Yeah.
And and then had the TikTok CEO up there, like the question they would ask, like, are you kidding me right now? Like, did your intern brief you on what TikTok is? Like, what are you doing? Right.
Yeah, I know. It's it is a worry, and there's no incentive for the people in power to change. But I mean, you look at any other political system in the world, and people were a lot younger.
I mean, I have to imagine a world of like looking at like you can have like Trump and Biden running for president again, like fucking like 10,000-year-old people and stuff. It's like insane.
It is insane. And I do think that the party leadership on both parties, like, what are they doing to build their pipeline?
There's no pipeline.
No, it seems crazy to me. Like, every company has like a leadership development program.
Yeah.
Where is the leadership development program in politics, in the political system?
I know Democrat side, they're not even doing no debates for the Democrats. They canceled that because, of course, they're afraid like Biden's gonna like say something dumb or stupid or do something, So there's no debates. On the other side, like Trump, DeSantis, who knows, right? It's like
I know. I mean, that's a problem I'd like to see a solution for. It's like, how do we bring back like really great people in politics?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, don't know the answer to that.
No. So, is there any like English food you miss?
Curry, English. I know it's Indian, but curry. There's nothing like an English curry.
Okay.
Fish and chips, proper fish and chips with vinegar.
And what kind of fish is it? Does it matter?
Not really. It's typically cod.
Cod, okay.
Yeah. Roast dinner. That's another classic, like roast potatoes, meat, ideally lamb. You don't get much lamb in the US. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love a lot of the food you can get in the US, and you can get much better Mexican in the US. Ribs, like meat and fish over here is amazing.
Yeah. So what's been your favorite American meal over here?
I think it's got to be the rib. Oh, ribs or the scallops.
Okay.
How do you say it? Scallops.
Scallops. So you like scallops?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in England, the fish and everything is small. Like the scallops are tiny, and here they are big.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's good.
Everything be a culture shock when you came here to see how big our meals are, which is insane. Like,
yeah. Do you know what? The first time we ate here, we went to Colorado on our way to Seattle, and we ordered a starter and then a main course, and we never did that again. Like,
I mean, a starter is a main course.
Yes.
A main course is like, it's like if you could eat your whole main course, you're just greedy. I mean, like,
I know. The irony though is like the more expensive the meal, the less you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we don't typically order. It's just a main meal now. No dessert, no starter.
So when you're going back to England for a visit?
Back for Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, Christmas here is great. But yeah, I'm very close to my family. And we've got some really good friends in England, so I'm looking forward to going back there. For that, yeah, it'd be good. And but although it's a strange time zone, I'll be working like all hours, like meetings till like really early in the morning and up again early in the morning. The England to Australia time zone does not work well.
No.
Oh well. It doesn't matter. It's a joy to be able to travel and work remotely.
You got to do.
I'm very lucky.
So is there anything else I asked you that I didn't, or anything else you want to talk about?
Do you know what? We've covered so many great topics. I don't think there's anything else that you should ask me about. Is there anything I haven't asked you?
No.
No, you've asked some fabulous questions. I really enjoyed chatting.
Can you share your social media with us so people can reach out to you?
Oh, yes, I can. So on LinkedIn, if you type Sarah Bell at LeapSheep, that's the platform I'm most active on. I've just started on TikTok today, but LeapSheep is LinkedIn is the kind of the best option, and then our website is leapsheep.com. One last thing is, if you are a founder and anything that we have said has resonated with you, we do run complimentary strategy sessions, and so we're always happy to chat to a founder that might be in need of help. So it's on the very bottom of the About Me on LinkedIn is the link to that.
So what's your TikTok handle?
It's Sarah Bell LeapSheep.
And what was the first video you did?
The first video I did was all about the challenges for the problems for founders in being able to be really honest about just how hard it is to start a startup. Like, if you go to events, you're putting your best self forward. If you're talking to an investor, you're putting your best self forward. Like, there's really no opportunity to have those conversations about, like, is this it? Like, what do I do? I'm stuck. Help. That was my first TikTok video. And it's one of the reasons why I value what we do at LeapSheep so much, is that we can actually be that trusted person for people to really confide in and get proper help. Having said that, my TikTok video, I thought it was I hope decent enough, but I proofread all the captions so that they all made sense. I took out all the ums,
And then the one word I missed was LeapSheep. So if you look at it, it says leaf shape. And of course I can't take it down unless I mean, the world of TikTok I've come to a little late, but I'm really enjoying it. I love the short form video. Like it's kind of the best opportunity to be exactly who you are. And I'm a bit late really to TikTok.
It's never too late.
No, because I understand you're on TikTok, aren't you? What's your main platform?
LinkedIn, Twitter, and TikTok.
Yeah.
I used to be a big fan of Snapchat, but it's just so complicated now. It's more like VR, AR stuff on there now. I used to really like Snapchat.
Right. Yeah. Do you know what? LinkedIn surprises me because I've never wanted to like LinkedIn, but there's so much great content on there and so many great connections to make.
Yeah.
I really it's one of my favorites.
It's the best thing out there. It's the worst thing too at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff you're like, what?
Yeah, I mean, some of it.
Like some of the stuff like post you want to post, but like sometimes I just don't understand, right? Like people like vacations I get sometimes, but people like putting, like my so-and-so died last night. I'm like, don't you have better things to do than post about someone dying, right? But I mean, I don't know.
That's a hard one. I feel like, and again, there's very much a sharing economy going on, but I feel like that kind of thing is, that's what I use WhatsApp for. It's like I'll message just like one person, or a phone call, right?
So you're on WhatsApp?
Yeah, the reason I'm on WhatsApp. I was quite an early adopter of WhatsApp is because, like, especially living away, it's quite a great way to have, like, I've got my school friends group, my friends from university, my family, and it's a good way to share photos of like my children or what we've been up to, or check in with people in a way that's not public.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's me, but whenever someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn, I always know it's a scam when they say go to WhatsApp.
Yes. Always. Oh yeah, I'd only ever message people on WhatsApp that I really know well. Yeah. It's much more of a personal. Yeah. I never use it for work.
That's something Nick needs to fix, all the scam profiles on there. Like all the time, at least once a day, it'd be like some attractive Asian female with a high school diploma, but she's a VP of finance for a $1 billion company,
Do you know what? Airbnb have done a good job, I think, with their, and again, there's a lot to do when you first set yourself up with Airbnb, but the fact that you've got to put your passport information in, and there's various steps, but I think they're probably the best tech platform that's actually been able to stop scammers. I mean, it's a lot to do, and if you're undocumented, what do you do then?
How much of that suck? Like you do a trip, like we'll say, like Paris, France, get Airbnb, and you walk there, like, and there's no house at the address.
Do you know what? I haven't. Have you been in that situation?
No,
I haven't. I don't think I'm not certain if that you could manage that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I have not kept on top of Airbnb scandals, but I think of all the platforms. I mean, even I've never really had a big problem with Uber. Not that I use it very often. I mean, it's a challenge. Like, how do you prove that people are who they say they are?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how technology is going to help with that, other than, well, I mean, probably blockchain technology, I think, would help.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see where blockchain goes in the future, to be honest.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
No, that's okay.
Blockchain, Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, there's many topics to talk about.
Thousands of cryptocurrency things out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting. We have a few blockchain startups as our subscribers, and one of the challenges is building a business model that works with blockchain. But there's some interesting stuff. I feel like it's kind of gone through its like valley of death, and then it's coming back out.
Yeah.
So
is there a tech out there that kind of went away? Like, for example, like I think a couple years ago, Web3 was a big thing. Now, when we talk about, I think Web3 is coming back, or what's a tech out there that kind of died that you think is going to come back?
Oh, I wonder. I mean, for me, and again, this hasn't died, but I am interested to see what happens with 3D printing. Because at one point, I think we all thought that there was going to be 3D printers in our houses.
Remember, for a while, people were like scared. Oh, everyone's going to be 3D printing guns and 3D bullets,
Yeah, and that hasn't really come to pass. And I think how 3D printing will be used in the future will be like by like industries. Like, you'll build houses with 3D printing, or skyscrapers, or like other things. And or like there might, I don't know how 3D printing would be used in like disaster recovery, for example. That I think I'm really interested to see more about that. I mean, I mentioned generative AI. That's obviously never died. I don't know. What do you think? Technologies that have kind of died that might come back?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think 3D printing is a good answer. I
Yeah.
mean, Web3 was probably like a flash in the pan. Now, people think
Yeah.
about it, right? I mean, like, you really need a multiverse, like,
Yeah.
and then like, I don't know. I really don't think the AR, VR headsets really went off like people thought they would,
No, I'll be interested to see how that happens. I mean, my biggest fear is that phones become implanted in like your eyes, like contact lenses.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I think a fear that I have for civilization because right now you can put your phone down. Whereas if it's in your eye, like how do you know if the person that you're talking with is
Yeah.
actually paying attention?
Yeah. You never close your eyes or whatever, like,
Yeah. I also can't put contact lenses in. I faint if anything goes into my eye. So it's like technology that would not work for me.
So, can you give us some advice on anything you want to talk about before we get out of here?
I think my best advice to a founder, do you think?
Mhm.
Yeah, my best advice to a founder is spend as much time as you can with your potential customers. Do not skip this step because you'll find yourself having to go back to it. Like, before or after you've built software, you may as well do it before you've built software. Just find out about your customer and who they are, what's important to them, what their biggest challenges are. Like that's the most important thing, I think. And also be creative, look to the edges because most people were trying to find a problem that's straightforward and easy to solve. It's when you go to the edges that you find a solution that's really worth building.
Sarah, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed chatting.
And to our listeners, thank you for your time as well. Remember to be great every day.